Chapter 14:12. 1 month was the time the land of exile would collapse. Yun Nua planet felt that not only the land of exile they were in, but the other lands of exile in the starry sky would also experience some changes in a month. Although from their senses this space might collapse in a month, in reality, this might not be the case. Who knew what the owner of that hand and the group of people behind it were planning? Yun Nua planet was in the middle of the starry sky. To put it simply, it was now the enemy's turn. They were not afraid of dealing with anything, but it was impossible to completely guess what the enemy wanted to do. For example, the distorted race might not have guessed that a group of uninvited guests had appeared in the experimental world under their control. When these uninvited guests came out in the open, it would be their turn. Now, they still needed to hide for a while until they sneaked up to the enemy. Then, they would give the enemy a fatal blow. The black fog retracted into Yun Nuashing's body, and he gently landed on the bottom of the sea. A layer of sand and dust splashed up from where his feet touched the ground. He slowly squatted down and stretched out his right hand. His thumb lightly brushed across his index finger, and the power of the rules wrapped around his finger so that the drop of blood that appeared would not melt into the sea. Then, he pointed his index finger at the ground, and a drop of blood bloomed, pushing all the sand and dust on the bottom of the sea to one side. His index finger brushed across the cold ground, drawing a golden rune that was more than 2 feet long. If one looked carefully at the golden runes and magnified them 100 times or even 1,000 times, one would realize that the golden blood was actually energy that had been combined in a specific form. There were also many small energy runes among them. Small energy vortexes appeared on the surface of the golden mark, and they were devouring energy at a rather slow speed. When the energy runes were full of energy, the 2-foot-long golden runes gradually disappeared. Yun Nuashing's figure once again merged into the void. Silence. There was no movement. No energy appeared in this place, and no life forms even visited this place. It was lonely and dead. This situation lasted for half an hour before Yun Nuashing's figure emerged from the place where he had just disappeared. He looked around. There's nothing going on. Won't this level of influence be noticed? Should I make a stronger one? After thinking about it, Yun Nuashing shook his head. It would be better not to. What if the strength was just a little bit higher and he was discovered? Judging from the level of surveillance where he was discovered when his progress in deciphering was less than 5%, the energy in the runes he left behind should be just enough to cover the edges and not be discovered. Feeling uneasy, Yun Nuashing observed for a while. After confirming that he would not be discovered, he quietly left this place. Even all traces of his appearance were wiped clean from the karma. When he chased Hui and the others' auras and found them, he only saw a huge sun under the sea. Its boundless light illuminated a huge area under the sea. By the way, boundless light was not an exaggeration. It was just an ordinary description. After all, just the core of that ball of light was boundless. It was the eldest son of the Huohuo family, Huohuo. Its towering body was at most 10,000 feet long. Even if there was a frightening amount of energy, it still maintained its own light and heat. The non-penetrating light did not penetrate half of the sea as he had expected. It only illuminated a large area around it. Huohuo's huge body was like a small island at the bottom of the sea. It was as if there were many lives around Huohuo. There were also many races around Huohuo. The place where the light illuminated was densely packed with life forms. Yun Nuashing could feel that the entire sea, no, 1/5 of the life forms on this sea planet were gathered around Huohuo. At this moment, the 3 sons of the Huohuo family were gathered together, which attracted more than half of the life forms in the sea. Standing within the range of the light, he could see a lively and harmonious scene. All he could see were unknown fish, unknown sea beasts, unknown crabs, unknown life forms. In short, he did not recognize any of them. Lord Fengling, over here. As soon as Yun Nuashing arrived at this sunny place, he heard the shouts. He tilted his head to look at the most dazzling light and saw Qing Yu and Hui standing in front of little Hua's head. Their expressions changed from time to time, as if they were discussing some topic. The three brothers of the Huahua family were gathered together. Middle Hua and Little Hua expressed joy and relief at his arrival, while Huahua looked over curiously. It was probably because it heard its younger brother, or younger sister chattering a lot in front of it. Every 3 sentences, it would be a name that it had never heard of before. Anyone would be very curious. Huahua seems to have something to give you. As soon as Yun Nuoshing arrived, he heard Qing Yu say this and couldn't help but be stunned. He tilted his head and then saw a ball of light the size of a ball stick to his body. His whole body sank into a pile of furry. His whole body was indescribably comfortable. In his line of sight, he could see a small Huahua that was exactly the same as Huahua rolling and rotating inside. He knew that this was an extension of the 3 senses. Huahua used this ball of light to hit him to tell him something. It contained a trace of gratitude. He cured Middle Hua, and also expressed some curiosity and something else, as if it wanted to tell him something. Yun Nuoshing hurriedly pulled himself out of the ball of light. Just as he was about to say something, a head-sized ball of light floated out from beside Little Hua. It was the ball of light that was on top of his head just now. At this moment it was also on top of his head and rotated a few times. Then, a trace of thought was transmitted. What did you just say? Yun Nuoshing was stunned for a moment. He didn't hear what Little Hua said clearly. However, he reckoned that he didn't need to hear it clearly. He saw Huahua suddenly open his mouth. That movement was really powerful. It was as if a crack had appeared from the middle of a mountain range that was thousands of feet tall that was a few meters away, forming an abyss-like crack. There was also a huge suction force coming from the crack. Before Yun Nuoshing and the others could react, Little Hua suddenly swung his head and threw them a distance away. Then, they were swallowed into Huahua's stomach by the flow of water. Buzz buzz. The ball of light around Huahua flickered, expressing its joy. Will Feng Lingjun and the others be okay? Qing Yu tilted her head and smiled faintly. They should be fine. The sudden movement made Si Yu and Feng Qinghuang scream. The 2 girls hurriedly held onto Yun Nuoshing's upper body. The group of people floated into the darkness ahead of them. Then, they saw a lot of strange phenomena. Fiery red energy surged like lava and waves of fire. It was like standing under the sun and looking outside. Their senses told them that they had entered a warm and comfortable place. Wow! What are those things? Why is Huahua's body like this? We hit it! Si Yu looked at the myriad of images that flashed before her eyes, and she only felt that it was exciting and soul-stirring. Her beautiful face was flushed red, and she screamed and closed her eyes when she saw a large ball of flame fragments rushing towards her. When the group of people passed through the flame, they felt that the temperature had increased a little. After they left the flame, the temperature dropped again. Si Yu opened her eyes in surprise and joy. Phew! What is that? What are those things around us? The inside of an energy life form's body is like this, a kingdom made of energy phenomena. Yun Nuoshing pointed at the meaningless energy phenomena in front of them and said, Energy life forms don't have physical bodies. If they don't hide it, they won't materialize their bodies with the power of rules like I did. What they show is the scene you see, their own energy, the power of rules that make up the energy life form, and the self-endowed concept. These 3 are combined. The latter 2 are like a rope that binds the former so that it won't dissipate. The body you see is actually just a ball of light and powerful energy. Huahua is an energy life form. Si Yu looked at the strange phenomena that flashed in front of her eyes. She clicked her tongue in admiration. I never thought it would be like this. Feng Qinghuang pulled the person in her arms and said, Self-endowed concept. What is that? In short, Yun Nuoshing pointed at her temple. She was referring to her brain, the spiritual part. The consciousness of a life form defines and limits itself. For example, who am I? What am I? The answers to these two questions are the factors and concepts that make up itself. The biggest difference between an energy life form and a physical life form is that the core of an energy life form is the soul and consciousness. The soul is the basic framework, and the consciousness is the component. With the basic framework, the consciousness comes first, and then the body. On the other hand, a physical life form has the body first and then the consciousness. The soul is still the framework. Hui added, so, an energy life form is not that easy to deal with. Every trace of energy contains its own consciousness, and the consciousness is limited by the soul. However, the soul of all living things is more or less the same. Yun Nuoxing pressed her chest and said to the two girls, actually, the inside of my body is more or less the same. It's just that the scene and the concept are different. The energy concept of the fire is light and heat. That's why it's like this. But inside my body, the elements of destruction and many other kinds of energy form and affect me together. What do you think the inside of my body is like? You and the others were speechless. It was scary just thinking about it. Yun Nuoxing twirled a lock of hair and smiled. If you are interested, you can enter my body and take a look. Also, you can tell me what it's like. What you see from other people's point of view is different from what you see from your own point of view. Enter inside. Hui blushed and patted Yun Nuoxing heavily. Buddy, don't talk nonsense. Yun Nuoxing tilted her head in confusion. Siyu and Feng Qinghuang also looked at Hui in confusion. He shook his head and sighed ambiguously. Jing Yuanji turned her head with a sorrowful look. 10 seconds later, Yun Nuoxing once again understood the meaning of her words. Her beautiful face flushed red. Hui screamed and was about to run away when he saw a white jade-like palm slap him in the face. He immediately rolled and screamed and flew backward. What the F***ck are you thinking about every day? Jing Yuanji covered her face speechlessly. She knew that Lord Hui would end up like this. Lord Feng's mind rarely drifted, but it didn't mean that he couldn't figure out the meaning behind it. After all, he had lived for so long. How could he not know some things? Siyu and Feng Qinghuang finally understood the question a few minutes later. They immediately blushed. Jing Yuanji couldn't help but sigh. After all, these two girls had lived for more than 100 years. They should know everything. Their reaction was so slow. They probably hadn't been in love before. After a long while, she also sighed. It seemed that she had no right to criticize others. Buddy, here. We've reached the destination. Hui shouted at the top of his voice, causing waves to appear in the sea. Yun Nuoxing glared in front of her with shame and annoyance. Only then did she slip away with the three girls. It was as if a huge, isolated area had suddenly appeared within the fire. The billowing seawater had suddenly disappeared without a trace. After Yun Nuoxing and the others crossed the isolation layer, they felt that they had landed on solid ground in an instant. They even subconsciously took a few steps forward, as if they had been walking all this time. Hui was standing not far ahead, holding a scroll in his left hand and waving it at them with his right hand. Yun Nuoxing glanced at the scroll and subconsciously felt a familiar aura. She couldn't help but frown. What's that? The array of the realm of the gods, Hui said in a flat tone. They all froze. Yun Nuoxing stepped forward and took the scroll from him. It was blank inside. The array had been used. Now it was just a high-quality scroll. It hadn't been damaged by external forces. He held the scroll and stroked it a few times. His frown deepened. It's indeed the array of the realm of the gods. There's the aura of the realm of the gods in it. A very powerful array was recorded here. I'm afraid, for us, well, for me, it's a very difficult array. Wow! Hui cried out in shock. He jumped more than 10 feet high, his face full of astonishment. In the current divine realm, There was no one other than his assistant who was the best in terms of formation skills. The second place was not even worth a fart. The former could create formations as he wished, creating thousands of formations in a second, creating formations out of thin air. In any case, we had never seen anyone who could reach even half of his level. But this primogenitor in the formation actually said that there was something that he found difficult to deal with. What's this thing? Can you trace it back? After shouting crazily for a while, we finally calmed down before he was hit. He squatted on the ground with Yun Nuoshing and leaned over to look at the blank array. Yun Nuoshing muttered to herself. Looking at the array where white and green intersected, she hesitated for a moment. Let me try. I don't know if I can do it in my current state of self-suppression. As she spoke, she took out the book of the epoch and placed it in the center of the array. Then, palm-sized arrays appeared around her. She stacked on top of the book of the epoch. There was a vertical line in the center of the arrays. After a while, she cut her 10 fingers and couldn't help but grin. She was bleeding today. The golden blood was the amalgamation of concept energy. Of course, it wasn't wrong to call it essence blood. For those who had a physical body, it was just that. She let the drop of golden blood fall on the array at the top and let it slowly seep into the next layer of array. Then, she repeated the process. Little by little, it dripped into the book of the epoch. Golden and dark red light flashed, illuminating the book of the epoch in gold and red. Suddenly, complex energy patterns appeared on the array below. Show me your existence. Murmuring, Yun Nuoshing held the book of the epoch and let it float an inch away. The gold and red light shone on the array, causing the energy patterns to appear faster and faster. Gradually, they formed a complicated array. Even the outer part of the array was complicated. Siyu and Feng Qinghuang almost fainted. Before 2/3 of the array appeared, Hui and Jing Yuanji were declared dead. I'm blind, I'm blind. That thing is not for humans to read. Hui covered his burning eyes and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Sure enough, it was not easy to become an array master. Even if one could become one, they might not be able to go very far. 10 minutes later, the light from the Book of Epochs faded, and the magic arrays returned to the void. An extremely beautiful magic array appeared on the originally blank magic array. The pattern looked very beautiful, but it was also very complicated. It was as if they had seen a 3-dimensional maze built with a radius of 100,000 light-years. Even Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes at the sight of it. I need to use my brain. It's so tiring. Yun Nuoshing sat down reluctantly. She took a look at the array and raised her head bitterly. I don't want to see. Hurry up, hurry up. Don't be pretentious. I don't have the ability, so you can only solve it. Hui waved his hand, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Maybe it has something to do with them. Yun Nuoshing's pretty face was full of reluctance. However, she knew the importance of this array. If something related to the realm of the gods appeared in this world, it definitely had nothing to do with the experimental subjects here. It could only be brought here by the distorted races. She was just about to concentrate on studying it with a bitter face. However, when she looked at Yun Nuoshing, she was stunned. This thing, what's wrong? Hui and the others hurriedly came over to take a look. Then, they all covered their heads and eyes and shrank to the side. The spiritual destructive power of that thing was too strong. This thing looks a little familiar. Yun Nuoshing had a strange expression. She stretched out her finger and pressed it on the array. She slid it along the path. It looks a little like 80%. No, this is my disintegration array of composition. This thing is very obscure and I don't use it much. I didn't recognize it at first glance. Yun Nuoshing said to Hui and the others while holding the array in shock. Is this really your array? Hui was also shocked and puzzled. Disintegration array of composition. It doesn't sound like anything good. What's the use of it? The meaning of the name is disintegration of composition. However, it's not as scary as you think. This thing does indeed have offensive power. The arrays that I create rarely have any offensive power. Yun Nuoshing shrugged. After knowing that this thing was created by her, the array seemed unimportant. She casually rolled it up and put it away. To put it simply, with this array, I can split you, I can split you as an individual into hundreds of independent parts. Your soul, your laws, your karma, your concepts, everything can be separated until your individual structure is reduced to a pile of parts. Hui couldn't help but gulp. He trembled and took a few steps back. His face was pale. That Feng, the realm of the gods can't be without a guardian yet. Can you spare me? At most, I won't be so mean in the future. It's just an analogy. Yun Nuoshing rolled her eyes at him. If we're talking about attacks, then it's definitely at the level of rules, or even at the level of order. Once it's torn apart, not many people can guarantee that they'll be unharmed. Then, they'll be finished. Even if there are some invincible rules, some invincible souls, and some invincible bodies, they'll be instantly killed when they encounter this magic circle. After all, the rules that belong to them are also part of the structure. Once it's torn apart, it'll be gone. However, I created this thing purely for research purposes. Hui and the others. There are many such arrays in the Book of Epoch. They might be stronger. When I first created the Book of Epochs, I lost a lot of hair. Yun Nuoshing pointed at the Book of Epochs floating beside her. Creating a disintegration array. As for arrays, you have to first lock on and then attack. Just by using this array to lock on, I can know which individual has which part. After that, I can tear apart whichever part one like. That's what I mean. I'm using it for research, and I don't deny that it has powerful offensive power. Then, my lady observer. Hui looked conflicted. Has your array been leaked out? How is that possible? How can these things be leaked out? Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes. It wouldn't be a big deal if I were to use these things myself, but if I were to use them in the God realm and let others know that they're forbidden techniques among forbidden techniques, the laws of the God realm would distort and erase the area before anyone could use them. Without a million years of dedicated research, who would be able to use a formation of this level that I've created? Without a few dozen Empyrean gods sacrificing their own essence, who would be able to use it so casually? Furthermore, this formation diagram is clearly incomplete. It's obvious that someone stole it and made it incomplete. Lord Feng. Jing Yuanji raised her hand weakly. An incomplete array. Stole it. You said it yourself, so it's still leaked out. Yun Nuoshing was startled. She lowered her head and pondered. Yes, that's what happened. But how is that possible? I can't possibly throw it out. The realm of the gods is… Wait a moment. The little angel, that had been hiding in his spiritual world all this time, suddenly let out a cry of surprise. She hurriedly emerged from his body, accompanied by waves of sacred music. She hurriedly steadied herself and said, I'm not too sure. But it's possible. It's very possible. It can only be that time. What the hell? Yun Nuoshing and the others looked at her in confusion. They didn't know what this anxious little angel was talking about. Last time, she was slightly anxious and pulled on his arm. When you were setting up the time node, the Guardian Temple was attacked. Oh, I remember. Not only did you wake me up, you even blew up a hole and forced us to move? Yun Nuoshing was still speaking with a matter-of-fact expression, but her expression suddenly darkened and became abnormally serious. You were afraid that you'd forget those things that you were researching, so you recorded them down. You were too lazy to bring them with you, and you also made a row of cabinets to decorate it. Hui suddenly thought of something and his expression became serious. After all, we didn't think that someone would break into the Guardian Temple. I lost most of my things in that attack. Yun Nuoshing understood. That kind of attack couldn't have destroyed those things that contained my divinity so easily. When I went to clean up the wreckage, I didn't find any fragments. I thought that it was really destroyed, but now it seems that it was taken away." Hui slapped his forehead and suddenly turned pale with fright. "Oh no! There are also some things that I recorded in there." "Oh ho!" Siyu let out a cry of surprise. Chapter 14:13. It was better to say that he did not react at all. He had never thought about this before. The attack decades ago was when Yun Nuo was in a bad state. Moreover, the attack was not directed at him. At that time, the deduction was that the people who attacked wanted to stop I Ching from finding something, and they did not know what it was. Anyway, they just wanted to stop it, or they just wanted to kill I Ching together. In fact, if he had left more than 10 seconds later, he might have really become a thing of the past with the Guardian Temple. Yes, that was what he thought at that time. Judging from the power of the attack and the ashes of the land after the attack, no matter what they wanted to destroy, they had achieved their goal. The attack contained an extremely large amount of energy, and even the little angel was seriously injured when he dodged to the limit. An attack of that level could indeed destroy the things created by Yun Nuoxing and Hui. Putting aside how powerful they were, they only created things with their divine energy, and did not use any special measures to protect them. Those things that were preserved were not indestructible. So they all thought that the things that the little angel could not save had turned into ashes. Then, in this place, the things that Yun Nuoxing had created himself appeared. The matter that was already set in stone had some strangeness, and there was some vague fog shrouding it. That day, those people, judging from many aspects, whether it was those who stopped Hui from setting up the time node, or those who destroyed the Guardian Temple, they were all people of a distorted race. So, destroying the Guardian Temple was convenient, but stealing their things was the main thing. Well, it could also be the other way around. They were going to kill I Ching to stop him from doing something, but when they destroyed the temple, they accidentally found a lot of things and ran away. Looking at the changing expressions on their faces, Yun Nuoxing's face did not look good. He waved his hand and said, "Anyway, it's all in the past. For the time being, there is no need to pursue the matter. What's important is that it happened. After the Guardian Temple was destroyed that day, there were indeed many things that were lost. They were all things that we thought had been destroyed. And it was also because of my negligence that I thought those places could not be attacked. At that time, the divine realm was not like it is now, where it kept the creation's barrier open to prevent outsiders from entering. Also, I've probably always thought that even if those things were lost to the outside world, anyone other than me who wanted to use them would have to pay a price that would allow them to reincarnate hundreds of times. That's probably what I thought. I've never thought of making up for it." Yun Nuoxing scratched his bangs in distress and sighed. "I thought I had done my best to avoid arrogance, he. My cultivation is still not enough." Feng Qinghuang frowned when she saw that their expressions were not good. She did not know what those high-level things were, but she could tell from their expressions that it was not a good thing. She pulled Yun Nuoxing's hand and said, "Little star. Calm down first. Let's analyze it first." She was actually feeling a little uneasy when she said that. Aside from Siyu, the other three were all old monsters. For her to try and calm them down, she felt that something was wrong. Phew! Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and nodded. He could also calm down quickly, but not as quickly as the person beside him. He looked at the little girl and nodded seriously. "You're right. We should calm down and think about what to do next." What do you want to analyze?" Feng Qinghuang also calmed down after he looked at her. She said seriously and cautiously, "I don't know much about those formations." You said that it is difficult for other people to use those powers and formations, but they can still use them, right? Just as I said earlier, without a million years or even millions of years of dedicated research and cultivation, it is impossible to successfully use it. Yun Nuoxing nodded and took out the formation map that he had just put away. For a formation like this, they can only use a sacrifice if they want to forcefully cast it. Spiritual energy, soul energy, divinity, and divine power that contain powerful laws are all possible. Moreover, they need to use at least a few dozen heavenly gods of origin. This array diagram appeared here, and it's trash that has already been used and thrown away. In other words, they have copied it and then used it, right? Yun Nuoshing looked at her seriously, thinking and carefully speaking. He nodded and said, yes. What about the other formations or things of the same level that were lost? Feng Qinghuang's eyes flashed quickly. The price is the same. The things that Feng and I left there are not simple things. Hui waved his hand and said, do you think they will use the same method to use the things that Feng and I created? Hui shook his head with a smile. Dozens of heavenly gods of origin. Even if they are low-level heavenly gods, they would need at least a few dozen. Even if they are high-level heavenly gods, they would need close to 1,000, and they would need to be of high quality. Where would they find so many life forms to use those things? High-level heavenly gods can be easily thrown away. They do have enough if they really want to use those things. Yun Nuoshing's eyes became extremely terrifying. These experimental subjects, these cage worlds, they have enough materials to support them. Hui and Jing Yuanji's expressions changed drastically. These experimental worlds, these worlds, they had to find enough life forms from the infinite worlds in the void to give birth to origin realm life forms. There would definitely be enough origin realm or heavenly gods for them to use. Moreover, these life forms were rather special. They were half of order and half of non-order, and they used distorted energy. This was enough to increase the quality of these experimental subjects by a lot. Feng Qinghuang was still thinking calmly. She slowly led Yun Nuoshing and the others to ponder the questions that she could not think of. She noticed the formation map in Yun Nuoshing's hand. She thought back to what he had just said about constructing a disintegration formation. Suddenly, a whimsical idea appeared in her mind. Little star. Can the disintegration formation be used against those formations? Magic array against magic array, there's basically no problem. A part of the energy lines in the disintegration magic array are used to mobilize the power of order, so it can deal with most magic arrays. As Yun Nuoshing spoke, his black eyes narrowed slightly. Split research, something that can make those from the realm of gods unable to use. Feng Qinghuang raised her head and looked at Feng Qinghuang's narrowed eyes. She tried her best to make sure that her voice did not tremble. It will be much easier to use it if you can analyze it clearly. Even if you only understand a part of it, it can reduce the consumption of materials. Yun Nuoshing completely understood what she was trying to say. Hui also understood that the speed this time would not be slower than Yun Nuoshing's. He sweated just thinking about it. Oh my God! This is going to be a disaster. What are those bastards trying to do by stealing the power of the realm of gods? What are they trying to do? Yun Nuoshing lowered her head and raised her hand to stroke her bangs. She had a very strange expression on her face. Do anything. There are some things that we don't do, but it doesn't mean that we can't do them. This is the void, and it controls the power of the realm of God. What can't it do? If all the lives in the middle plane and the upper plane can control 30% of the power of the realm of gods, and with the premise that they listen to orders, I can rely on them to kill the 12 primeval gods of the underworld. Even if the lord of the underworld is a mid-level primeval, or at worst, a high-level primeval, I can still rely on this. I can sacrifice 2 planes to perish together with it. Do you believe me? The sweat on Huey's face turned into a waterfall. Yes, there are some things that they don't do, but it doesn't mean that they can't do them. The power of the realm of gods was the power bestowed by the primeval gods. Since ancient times, many people rushed to the realm of gods to be the road to the highest place of gods. However, the power of the realm of gods was not so easy to control. Therefore, the two hypotheses that Maple mentioned just now were just hypotheses. It was impossible to do it. Jing Yuanji dared not to say anything to interrupt the thoughts of the two lords. She could not help but look down at the formation in Lord Maple's hand. Her pretty face was sweating. They did not expect that the thing brought by the fire would be such a thing. A puzzle piece with countless links pieced together. It even showed them part of the future. Part of the future was almost real, and it might even happen now. Yun Nuoxing and Hui stood silently with their heads down. The expression on their faces was as dark as the end of the void. No one spoke. The little angel just looked at Yun Nuoxing silently, not knowing what to say. This is their turn. Hui and the others raised their heads and looked at Yun Nuoxing, who suddenly spoke. He took a deep breath and his expression slowly returned to normal. However, there was a trace of unfathomable coldness on his calm face. No one knew what he was thinking. Now they have the upper hand. This is their turn. We can only wait for them to finish their moves, and then find a way to counter their move. No, we came here to seize the upper hand and force our way into our turn. However, we still need some time. Let them take what they want. Take it, Yi Futian said. Yun Nuoxing took another deep breath and exhaled hard. Then, a stunning smile bloomed on his face. There will be a time when they pay the price. Things haven't reached the worst situation yet. Nothing has happened yet. There's no need to think too much about despair. Hui nodded and chuckled. Of course, we still need to be on guard against the worst situation. We still need to be vigilant. However, it's just a part of the immature power that has been stolen. It's just a sneak attack from the back. It's nothing. Victory is ours. It's just that it has been delayed a little. Yun Nuoxing knocked on his head with the back of his hand and transmitted the conversation to all the people of the realm of the gods in this world through his soul. After that, he said, I Ching, Lady Green, and everyone else, you have heard what happened. Other than the task at hand, try to see if there are any similar carriers of the power of the realm of the gods in your world. If there are, get it at all cost. This task is very important. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly thought of something. Other than the power of the realm of the gods, there might be the power of the death mist of the abyss or the power of otherworld. However, it's hard to tell which one is which. Try to pay attention to those two. Yes, Lord. For the realm of the gods. Qing Yu, who was waiting outside, was holding and tossing the furry ball of light up and down in boredom. Suddenly, he saw a ball of light coming out from the belly of Big Fire. Then, Yun Nuoxing and a group of people walked out of the ball of light. Just as he was about to greet them happily, he saw that all of them looked very serious. He was slightly stunned. He did not know what they had experienced inside that caused such a change in their expressions. When they gathered together, their aura was even stronger by countless times. It made him a little afraid to go near them. Feng Ling? He whispered. That thing, is it something from your world? Our world? Yun Nuoxing looked a little strange. Looking at him, he could not help but ask, You know where we came from? Hui and the others also looked a little strange. When did they reveal such a serious flaw? Could it be that this thing was found by Big Fire? Yes. Yun Nuoxing and the others' expressions froze. Just as they were about to explain, they heard Qing Yu say, You came from the lower level areas. You can only come to the higher level areas after breaking through, just like the people from the lower level areas who occasionally appear. However, there have been a lot fewer of them recently. You might have to wait for a period of time. Yun Nuoxing and the others were stunned again. They looked at each other and did not know whether to laugh or cry. So it was this world. That was right, but they thought that he was referring to the world they really came from. They thought that he had seen through it, or that he had recovered his memories before he was kidnapped. When Big Fire found that thing and informed me, I felt that it seemed to be a little similar to you, so I asked you to go and take a look, Qing Yu said. It is indeed something from our world. Yun Nuoshing grinned. He wanted to laugh but could not. He could only shake his head. Yes, but it's nothing special. It's just that, well, I kind of want to go back and take a look. Oh, I understand. When we left the lower level areas and came here, we also had the same mentality. We always wanted to go back, but we couldn't. Unknowingly, many years have passed. Qin Yu nodded understandingly and sighed, but there's nothing else we can do except think about it. We can't find a way to go back, we can't find a way to leave this place. We can only live first. Live well. In the future, there will always be a chance. Yes, there will always be a chance in the future. Yun Nuoshing nodded. On the surface, he concealed it very well. He showed an appropriate expression of melancholy, but his mood was still as gloomy as a hailstorm. Hui patted Yun Nuoshing's back. Don't worry. It's useless to think too much now. Yun Nuoshing shook his head. I know, but if I don't think about it, I'm worried that something uncontrollable will suddenly appear and I won't be able to deal with it. In the future, there are countless variables, countless possibilities, and countless choices. Even if it's just a draft in my mind, I have to go through it first so that I won't be caught off guard in the future. Hui glanced at him and sighed. I know. Don't push yourself too hard. I'll bear it with you. We're all here. Yes. Yun Nuoshing nodded. His gloomy expression recovered a little. For now they could put down part of their energy and ignore those unpredictable things. First, they had to focus on the current situation. They needed to solve the current situation and find the place where the distorted races were as soon as possible to take back the leadership. Although it was not that easy, they still had to do their best. Qin Yu saw that their expressions were slightly relaxed and smiled happily. He turned around to check on the three fires. He also invited Yun Nuoshing and the others to come and take a look. However, the whole scene was very familiar to Yun Nuoshing. Raising fish. Was there a big difference between that and a poop picker? Smoothing its fur and checking its physical condition to see if it was not acclimatized to the water and was not in a good mood. Then, he would take it out for a walk or two and make it happy. Although one was on the ground and the other was at the bottom of the sea. Well, anyway, that was what it meant. There was not a big difference. Raising fish, pets, yes, they were all pets, although this pet was a little too big. Yun Nuoshing and the others watched as Qin Yu grabbed Huohua's biggest, sensory light ball, that was 300 feet in size, and fiercely rubbed it. Then, they saw the latter's huge body rolling on the bottom of the sea. The wind and clouds surged, and the tides rose and fell, stirring up the entire bottom of the sea. All living creatures fled, but they were not particularly frightened. They seemed to be used to it. They just retreated a little further away and waited for the guy who had been rubbed by its master to calm down. Hui was even slapped by Huohua's huge tail. He flew backward and crashed into Xiaohua. Xiaohua also mischievously retreated and bumped into Zhonghua. After the lazy Zhonghua was relieved, he was too lazy to move and simply floated in the water. After being knocked into, he was directly pressed to the bottom of the sea, crushing a large group of innocent aquatic creatures. He even felt quite comfortable and squashed them a few times. Yun Nuoshing looked at the large group of squashed fish cakes. There was even a cuttlefish that was 1,000 feet in size that was being pressed to the point that it was spitting out scarlet blood like ink. It vomited until it was about to stop breathing. She could not help but laugh dryly and prayed for those little lives for a second. After a few hours, Qin Yu waved her hand and pulled Zhonghua up with a bitter smile. She asked it to let go of those pitiful creatures that had already been squashed and let it lie back down in its original pit. Then, she patted Xiaohua and Huohua. The latter two fishes gently touched each other. The sensory light ball also moved closer. She also greeted Yun Nuoshing and the others. Xiaohua then turned and swam towards the bottom of the sea in another direction. Huohua also turned and prepared to go in another direction. The three of them are usually scattered in 3 different places. They don't stay together for long even if they gather every day. Qin Yu said with a smile to Yun Nuoxing and the others. Every time Zhonghua makes a nest here, Xiaohua and Huohua have to go somewhere else. This is where Huohua used to be. So lazy. Yun Nuoxing originally wanted to say this, but he felt that if he said this, he might be despised by the people around him, so he didn't say it. He just laughed dryly. He understood that the reason for splitting up was probably to prevent too much heat from accumulating in one part of the ocean. He laughed, but then he thought of what they said before they came down, and his smile froze. It seems like there isn't much I can help with. I thought you were talking about the kind of fish rearing. Qin Yu covered her mouth and laughed. Many people would misunderstand. Just like I told you before, there would be a new king who would steal our family's responsibility. However, they would still obediently return it in the end, after they understand. As for helping, you've already helped me once. Qin Yu stared at Yun Nuoxing and made a bow that he recognized. She said, "Thank you again, Mr. Feng Ling. I can't deal with the kind of injury from Zhonghua. Without you, its vitality might be greatly damaged." Oh, that counts. Forget it then. Yun Nuoxing waved her hand. Seeing the unpretentious and undisguised look in Qin Yu's eyes, he felt a little emotional. Those were very, very important companions. They were not just ordinary pets, nor were they just for this world. They were people that he had personally raised and watched grow up family. Therefore, he did not refuse this bow. However, he could not stand being stared at by Qin Yu, this sissy. He quickly turned his head and said, "Ahem. Well, is today's matter over? Is there any fun place under the sea?" Under the sea. Qin Yu thought for a moment and suddenly laughed. She waved her hand and signaled everyone to follow Huohua, who had not gone far. "There is indeed a place for you to take a look. It's also under the sea. It will be very lively there too, Huohua. Wait for us." Under the sea? Yun Nuoxing thought for a moment and said, "That big fish farmer in the south?" Qin Yu nodded and smiled. "Let's not talk about those life forms. I think you will like that southern king." Chapter 14:14. A huge ball of light swept across the seabed like a small sun, dispelling the darkness within hundreds of miles and exposing some of the strange life forms in the ocean to everyone's sight. The life forms of the deep sea looked very different from those of the shallow sea and land. It was almost the same in the realm of the god. However, there were also many special races in the deep sea that did not follow this natural law. Logically speaking, this should be the case for ordinary lifeforms. But although they had seen some strange lifeforms along the way, it was because they did not know who they were, but they did not see any lifeforms that were deformed or lacking in characteristics. At first, Yun Nuoxing thought that it was the result of the natural law of this world. But when he came to his senses and found himself sitting on the back of Big Fire, he suddenly realized that this was probably the biggest difference. Who would put a few moving suns at the bottom of the sea? The existence of the big, small, medium, and Big Fire had probably taken over the guidance of most of the life forms in the ocean. Yun Nuoxing accidentally talked to Qin Yu about the existence of this planet. They had been discovered to be life forms from the lower realms, so it was natural that they did not know anything. He was also happy to ask some questions. For example, why were they all raising fish? Especially that guy from the Southern Empire who ruled the ocean. He was actually a fish farmer, and unlike Qin Yu who was raising 3 big fish, he was actually raising hundreds of different kinds of fish. Probably because the first life forms came from the ocean. He did not know if this natural law was universal. We don't know about other places, but the first life forms on our planet were indeed born in the ocean. Qin Yu smiled. This is recorded. Before we, the lower realms, visited this planet, there were only surging waves and incessant storms. According to the time, The original life forms of this planet had not evolved into a slightly more advanced life form and were still living in this ocean. Yun Nuoshing was indeed interested in this planet, but he might have to change the concept. What he was really interested in was the life forms created by a unique race created by a distorted race. It was just a concept. For people like them who only moved their fingers to create a world, the creation of ordinary life forms was certainly not of much interest to them. What he cared about was this relationship of creation and succession. Probably, he wanted to see what kind of answer they could come up with. From here, we will enter the workshop of the Southern Emperor. This entire area is his workshop. Qing Yu stretched out her hand and gestured a large area in front and behind. However, since there were no specific landmarks, Yun Nuoshing and the others could not calculate what kind of area it was. They could only assume that the place they were at now was the place where the Southern Emperor was causing trouble. While Qing Yu was reminding them, many black shadows suddenly appeared around them. Those were groups of unheard-of marine species, fishes. Some were long, some were flat, and their fins looked like wings. Some had horns, some had eyes that took up half of their heads, some had tails that were bigger than their bodies, and some could split into individuals and put them back together. The last one should be a group. The individuals were quite small, each less than the size of a palm. They looked like transparent starfish, a bit like a combination of starfish and jellyfish. Their transparent bodies were filled with a scarlet substance, which directly attracted the attention of Yun Nuoshing and the others. And it was not only the transparent starfish that was like this. If they used their energy to sense it, they would find that these groups that were attracted by the light of the fire more or less had traces of distorted energy in their bodies. Their bodies were between the energy state and the material state. Obviously, they were not as real as the life forms they saw in the sea ahead. It seems that these are the life forms they created. How is it? Can you see anything? Hui said to Yun Nuoshing in his soul. Just like many man-made objects on the continent, most of the individuals are physical existences, and the rest are made up of energy. The distorted energy is probably mixed in this way. At present, it seems that the distorted energy will not affect these life forms. Just like the life forms in these areas, half of their bodies are made up of distorted energy, and they are more docile. They have long been used to it. The energy that exists in their creations is also docile. Yun Nuoshing looked around. He could not see too far away, but he could touch it with his energy. There were more life forms in those dark places coming towards the light of the fire. These individual life forms, almost all had the same characteristic. These life forms are not very good. Hui frowned when he heard that. Life forms are neither pure nor balanced. Right now, there's nothing special about them, so they can't pose a threat. Speaking of which, with a being at reciprocity watching over them, there probably won't be any threat. I'm afraid that they will lose control. It's just a matter of time. Yun Nuoshing said. The nearby sea creatures did not dare to approach due to the majestic power of the fire. They circled around in a circle. Qing Yu pointed at the fish, and the strange fish and said, "Actually, these are all failed creations. Their life forms are not stable, and they can lose control at any time. They can only be locked in this place, and cannot leave this sea area. The truly stable, normal creations " he laughed. "You have already seen those. You didn't expect it, did you?" Yun Nuoshing blinked and nodded. "If you didn't say it, I wouldn't have known. I thought that the life forms outside were all life forms that originated from this planet." Siyu quickly caught a long-tailed fish that flew past in front of her. She could not help but laugh as she watched it struggle in her hand in shock and fear. It jumped like a spring. The silver-yellow fish struggled for a while. Suddenly, it bent into an inverted hook and bit her wrist when she was not paying attention. The sharp pain made her cry out in surprise. She quickly let go of the fish in her hand. "What's wrong?" Yun Nuoshing heard the sound and turned around. He saw her holding her right wrist and sticking her tongue out at him. Nothing. I was bitten. It's nothing. Yun Nuoshing could not help but roll his eyes. None of these small life forms around the fire would be so close. This girl must be too naughty. She must have provoked something. He shook his head and reached out to grab her wrist without any explanation. He pulled off her left hand that was covering her wrist. Hey, it's nothing. You don't have to be so nervous. It's just a bite. Seeing him carefully examining the wound on her wrist, Siyu's pretty face blushed. She also took a look at it. There was only a row of very small teeth marks. It was only 2 inches long. There were 2 slightly larger holes at both ends of the teeth marks. They were not very deep. She had suppressed the blood and did not let it come out. After looking at it for a while, Yun Nuoshing did not find any problem. He casually pressed away the row of teeth marks that did not hurt anything. He reached out his hand and flicked Siyu's forehead. You behave yourself. This girl was getting more and more naughty. If he did not punish her for 3 days, she would become a troublemaker. Speaking of which, when he first met her, she was very quiet and ladylike. Sure enough, he did not know her true nature because he did not spend enough time with her. When this girl threw away all her disguises and masks and appeared in front of him with a smile, he did not feel anything. It was not until now that he realized that he had picked up an extremely naughty girl. A very small episode passed by in a moment. Hui suddenly pricked up his ears. Did you hear a dong 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 sound? It seems like someone is knocking on something at the bottom of the sea. Yun Nuoshing and Jing Yuanji both nodded. Qin Yu heard him and pointed to the front. The surrounding light dimmed a little. The big fire restrained its flames. In front of the bright light there was a spot of light. We're almost there. That's the place where the old thief works. The dong 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 sound came from there. Dong. As they spoke, as they continued to get closer, this time they could hear a shocking sound echoing clearly in their ears. The sea water shook a little because of the sound wave. Many small creatures hovering around the big fire had already fled in fear before Yun Nuoshing and the others heard the sound. Let's go. We'll go over the rest of the way by ourselves. It's not good to let the big fire get close. Qin Yu stood up and waved to Yun Nuoshing and the others. Then, he took the lead and jumped off the back of the big fire. Qin Yu waved his hand and waved at the big fire. Watching it wrap up a large number of creatures in this sea area and go into the distance, he laughed and turned to swim towards the light at the bottom of the sea. Without the former's small sun-like light, the light in front of them was much clearer. They could see that it was a piece of pentagonal magic circle that was 10 feet in size, swallowing and spitting out a huge amount of energy. Yun Nuoshing looked at the shining magic circle at the bottom of the sea and was a little interested. Speaking of which, the magic circle in this world was pentagonal. It was indeed very different from the realm of the god. Even if it was similar, there was still a big difference. Delimiting the size of the area, absorbing vitality, gathering luck. Is there such a thing as luck in this world? Yun Nuoshing subconsciously analyzed the use of those pentagonal magic circles. As she looked at them, she could not help but be surprised and murmured to herself in her soul, is it using the characteristics of luck? Well, for a creation of this level, luck is indeed very important. But even a magic circle of this level is used. It seems that the person who drew the magic circle is at his wit's end. There is no other way. The only thing left is to constantly and repeatedly use the things that they already know, and see if they will be lucky enough to create what they want. We could not help but say, it's very similar to when I first started to create a world. At that time, I made a mistake in a rule, but I couldn't bear to destroy it and start over again. So, I had to use some unorthodox methods like this. Then, I stubbornly worked hard, thinking that it would be good if I could get through the difficulties by a fluke and create a special world while I was at it. When Siyu heard that he did not finish, she quickly said, and then. Hui pursed his lips and smiled bitterly. My luck was bad. What was supposed to explode still exploded, and the explosion was even worse. It was fragmented and there was no way to salvage it. See, you laughed dryly. It sounded like a very sad story. Luck was indeed not very reliable. No. She turned her head and looked at Yun Nuashing. Suddenly, she scratched her head and laughed foolishly. It should have never been reliable. After all, the great observer once said, luck has no other use except to choose the worst option. Yun Nuashing shuddered and looked around with a strange expression. Then, she turned her head and looked at Siyu. She saw that Siyu was putting her palms together in a dignified manner and moving her lips. She was probably chanting the name of Buddha in her heart. Yun Nuashing felt puzzled. I keep feeling that something very bad floated past just now. Qing Yu led the group through the pentagonal formation. Suddenly, their line of sight flashed. They saw people walking in and out of the white jade-like building. People wearing white robes and long coats were running at a speed that was not affected by their clothes. There were also a few people wearing black robes and black masks. They had short knives, short swords, and long whips. They were dressed like assassins from some empire. They had a bunch of glowing balls on their heads and a few of them in their arms. They looked like circus performers as they ran past them. There seemed to be a swordsman as well. A swordsman carrying a sword and dozens of weapons on his back. The weapons on his back were all different. Which world was this swordsman from? Yun Nuashing and the others only realized that they were walking on solid ground after taking 2 or 3 steps forward. The water around them was all gone. However, the scene in front of them was even more exciting than when they realized that they were walking on the ground. The scene in front of them was comparable to an emergency situation or an escape from a disaster. It was hard for them to associate this with the hall of the ruler of the ocean, especially the swordsman who was running past them. The man was wearing a hat with the word swordsman written on it. They could not take their eyes off him for a long time. Spud! Don't run, Spud! Wait a minute! Qing Yu suddenly reached out and grabbed a young man in a white robe who was running in front of them. The young man was suddenly stopped and called by the name that Ping hated the most. The veins on his forehead bulged, and he opened his mouth with the force of a storm. He wanted nothing more than to greet the whole family. Which bastard is that? Why are you here? And you brought a guest? I'm here to look for the old thief. I've brought someone to see what's going on. Why are you all in such a mess? Qing Yu said with a smile as if she did not hear him. The young man with the strange name sighed. There was a sudden burst of energy in the core just now. It destroyed a lot of magic circles and runic stones. Now everyone here is busy. Boss is scratching his head because of this. Well, where is the old thief? Qing Yu stuck out her tongue. Spud's expression changed slightly. He looked around and lowered his voice. The news hasn't spread yet. The others don't know. Boss is at the hall of detention. There are many others there as well. It's urgent. I won't say much. We'll talk when things calm down. Isn't the hall of detention? Qing Yu blinked and understood something. Seeing Spud run away, she quickly waved her hand. Spud! Be careful not to fall. F*CKU. At Yen. Old thief's name is Yang Yu. Yun Nuashing and the others were stunned for a long time as they watched the second noteworthy person leave. Then, they let out a deep breath. What is it? What's going on here? Yun Nuashing walked closer. He had noticed that the young man named Yang Yu, nicknamed Spud, had lowered his voice as if he was hiding something. There seems to be something. Qing Yu nodded and looked left and right before heading towards one of the corridors of the building. He lowered his voice and spoke to them quietly. It seems that there's a problem with the place where those dangerous creatures are being held. The explosion of energy from the core just now might have destroyed part of the wards and formations of the prison. It's a mess now. Using his brain to analyze and imagine, a place where all sorts of dangerous creatures were being held captive. If he could not imagine it, It would be enough to strengthen those harmless little fellows by a few 100 million times. What would it be like if creatures of that level were to cause a ruckus in the Hall of Research? Well, with the Empyrean god of origin holding the fort, it probably wouldn't be much of a scene. It would probably be unusually thrilling but safe. However, he still had to check out the situation. He had just slipped out of a tense and violent world and came to this peaceful world. He hadn't even had a moment of peace before encountering a jigsaw puzzle piece that gave everyone a headache. Now, he had to check out some other things. He really couldn't have a moment of peace. Going against most of the flow of people, Qing Yu brought Yun Nuoxing and the others to the location of the prison hall. It was a dark and gloomy place from the color scheme to the decorations. It looked like a prison, but it was not people who were locked inside, but some dangerous creations. This space was an independent space. Half of it was in the void and the other half was in the real world. Looking at it as a whole, one could see that this was a large group of buildings standing in the void. The place they had just walked out of was a gathering place for teleportation. At this moment, they were standing in front of an independent hall that extended into the void. This hall was connected to the group of buildings by a long bridge, probably so that this part could be directly sunk into the void in times of danger. When Yun Nuoxing and the others hurriedly rushed to the scene, they immediately saw that this gloomy, dark, and enormous hall of 1,000,000 feet was damaged. The lower half of the hall was even emitting energy sparks that were bursting out of energy. From time to time, it would jump and light would illuminate the void. The hall would suddenly tremble as if it was convulsing. There was also some movement inside, probably a conflict. A large number of powerful lifeforms were currently surrounding this building. Upon seeing them and Qing Yu, they all respectfully bowed and stepped aside. Behind them, the door was already wide open. It had been blasted apart, the door had been blown away. As soon as they stepped into the prison hall, they suddenly felt as if the space here had been separated from the space outside. The feeling from just a second ago was completely different from what they felt at this moment. Scarlet and dark blue light flickered within the hall. Raising their heads, they could even see that the ceiling of the hall had been blown apart. Fragments would fall down from there as it shook, forming a pile of fragments over 10 meters to their right. Even more cracks could be seen in the corridor. There were even more traces of energy destruction in the corridor leading to the lower levels. Injured people were constantly being evacuated from that direction. Aside from around a dozen gods, there were quite a few who had just reached reciprocity. They seemed to be in extremely horrible shape. Their clothes had all been torn to shreds. One of them even had half of his body turned into transparent energy, as if he had been injured by laws. The situation below might be more dangerous than they had imagined. Qing Yu hurriedly went down. Yun Nuoxing and the others looked at each other, shrugged their shoulders, sighed, and hurriedly followed. Just as they walked down 1 or 2 floors, they heard rough shouts coming from inside, causing the walls to tremble. Group 3, take the injured and retreat. Group 1 and 2, continue to advance. Prepare the purifying rune stones. If you see any half-conscious, throw a ton of purifying stones at them. Don't even think about saving those that are completely out of control. Let them have a good dream. That idiot, come down from the sealed walls of the hall. Most of your energy has been sealed by the walls. Are you waiting for them to slap you to death? Purify group, go. Throw the purifying stones first. Don't smash the floor. There are still many uncontrollable beings below. If the floor collapses, we'll all go down to feed the fishes. Group 6. Group 6, have you infiltrated the 3rd level? Hurry up and activate the core of the detention hall's protective formation. Have it strengthen its defensive power and seal off the 7th, 8th, and 9th levels. Even if it can't hold on forever, it has to hold on until we pass through. Reduce all the energy in the upper levels of the hall and only maintain the initial momentum. Come back as soon as you're done. Your concealing stones won't be able to hold on for much longer. The one who appeared in front of them and roared like a lion from Hudong was a man who was about the same height as him. However, he looked very sturdy and muscular. His black tights outlined his strong lines. He had a face of about 30 years old, and the lines on his face were very strong. His thick black hair draped over his shoulders was handsome, but there was a bald patch in the middle of his forehead. Although they didn't know the specific situation, they could tell from the tense and serious scene in front of them and the violent energy that kept coming from below. Of course, the most important thing was, Yun Nuoshing raised his head and looked at the sturdy young man's face. His cheeks twitched and he quickly looked away. A bald patch really had a big impact. Chapter 14-15. Rumbling noises could be heard from all directions of the hall. Cracks could be seen as streaks of energy flames climbed up to the outside of the hall, which was already in a state of disintegration. Fragments were constantly falling from the main body of the hall. On one side of the hall, there was a height that was closer to the void. The falling fragments were floating in the air, and did not fall, forming a spectacular cluster of fragments. Even though they were hanging there, they were still bursting with energy flames, as if some of their energy had not been exhausted. It doesn't matter if it's a hall or not. If the upper hall is destroyed, just rebuild it. Remove all energy from the upper hall. Now, immediately. Use all the energy to maintain the seals on the lower, 7th, 8th, and 9th floors. As a violent wave of energy swept across, Yun Nuoshing could clearly feel that the weak energy reaction from the upper hall had risen to a very high level in an instant. Then, it disappeared completely in an instant. After a long while, a huge energy reaction of the same level was felt from a short distance below. The energy transfer seemed to have ended. At the same time, the shaking and collapse of the lower hall had lessened a lot. At first, it was shaking like an earthquake. Now, there was only a slight tremor. It was probably some sort of defensive measure that had taken effect. When the situation calmed down a little, the sturdy young man in front of him slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Only then did Qin Yu speak. "Old thief, how's the situation?" He had long known that someone was coming behind him. He thought that it was backup and did not have time to arrange for it. When he heard Qin Yu's voice, he quickly turned around and stared at Qin Yu with wide eyes. "Sissy, why are you here? As you can see, the situation is not good." "What a headache. I'm afraid that not only will the upper hall be abandoned, but the lower hall will also be lost. Now we can only save as much as we can. There's a lot of important information in the hall." These are your friends?" "They're the ones I told you about last time." Qin Yu spread his hands and looked further ahead. The battle here was very tense. Many of the failed projects and dangerous lives imprisoned in the lower level were constantly surging up and attacking the defensive line set up by the old thief. Following the principle of saving as much as they could and destroying as much as they could, they did not use their full strength in the battle. More or less, they saved some of them. Of course, Yun Nuoshing's opinion was that they did not dare to use their full strength because they were afraid of tearing down the hall and burying them alive with the failed projects. What the hell is going on? The prison hall's defense level should be higher than your imperial palaces. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any power in this area that can break through that layer of defense. Qin Yu asked in a low voice as she looked in confusion at the intense battle in front of her. She looked at the people who were retreating to help the injured. "What a coincidence, I thought so too." Old Thief frowned and scratched his head with all his might. When he realized that a few strands of hair had fallen to the ground, he let out a long sigh. "Ah, my hair." He was so worried that he was about to go bald. The core that he had assumed to be eternally cold had suddenly erupted with a powerful energy blast. That level of energy blast should have been insignificant, and there was no need for much vigilance or adjustment. However, the energy blasts that should have been charging in all directions suddenly charged towards him as if they had grown eyes. and most of them had landed on the prison hall. With a wave of his hand, he used energy to construct the prison hall's current form. It was broken and split into over 20 parts, and he pointed at several large cracks. It was fortunate that the core was not destroyed all at once when the initial attack landed on these parts. It was also fortunate that the core of this space was not destroyed, or all of us would have to circle around the void. Everything we lost would be lost, and nothing would be recovered. What do you mean by all of them were charging towards him? Qing Yu was a little taken aback. 90% of the energy blasts from the core had landed on the prison hall. Old Thief repeated, his bitter smile even more pronounced. He did not know what had happened from start to finish, and only knew one fact. His building had been torn down. Why would the core suddenly erupt? Wasn't there nothing all this time? Millions of years ago it was said to be frozen. Uncomfortable. Headache. Yun Nuoshing could not help rolling her eyes at Old Thief's nagging. There was a powerful energy seal over the surface of the cold seabed, and there were people monitoring it at all times. If the seal was damaged, they would appear at once to repair it. They definitely would not have discovered the real situation, and with such a thick seal, even Old Thief would need physical contact to probe the situation inside. Whatever the case may be, that is what happened. Let's not talk about the core for now. What should we do now? There are many dangerous creations in the prison hall, and there are many materials left from the research of those creations. Should we save those things? Qing Yu said, waving her hand to interrupt Old Thief's nagging. Most of them can't be saved, and Old Thief looked at the place where the battle was taking place, and could not help but frown. And a considerable number of creations can't survive. He paused for a moment, and then stared at the model of the prison hall that he had condensed with energy, and gritted his teeth. We want to go to the lower levels, but it is too dangerous, and there is a lot of leaked energy that is not easy to deal with. I don't know why they are so slow. The energy from the upper levels has already been transferred to the lower levels, and it would be enough to seal 7 to 9 more levels. Why are they still, my lord? The core of the prison hall is damaged. We can't activate the seals on the lower 3 levels. The sudden voice caused Old Thief's resolute face to darken. His back was bleak and lonely, and a thick sense of tragedy shrouded him. It could not be dispelled, cut, and sorted out. Yun Nuoshing and the others could not help but want to laugh. Save it. Quickly save it. If the core collapses, my lord, there is no way to save it. There are 6 wounds on the core from direct attacks. Most of its functions have stopped. It will collapse in 2 hours, and the prison hall can't be held. The voice on the other side was also very anxious, and it seemed that the situation was also very urgent. Old Thief's face turned pale. Go to hell, cough cough, things have already come to this, damn it. Then we can only give up, but before we give up, right, how is the suppression array at the bottom level? My lord, the suppression array has also lost its effect. We have lost the last means to suppress the lower 3 levels, and I'm afraid their seals can't be maintained anymore. Ah, what a sin. Heavens, bah. Old Thief patted the wall beside him with a face full of bitterness and hatred, causing the prison hall to tremble again. After a while, it returned to normal. It seems that we still have to make a trip down there. The seals on the lower 3 levels can't be reactivated, and with the current defensive power, it will be broken in less than half an hour. At that time, if the truly dangerous life forms imprison there rush out, I'm afraid that even if we banish the prison hall into the void now, it won't solve the problem. If we don't reactivate the suppression array at the bottom level, they can still survive in the void, and they won't be able to last until they are dissolved by the void. Let me interrupt. Why don't you directly get rid of those dangerous creations and instead keep them? Yun Nuoshing finally remembered to interrupt at this moment, and hurriedly asked. Old Thief tilted his head and glanced at Qing Yu. Seeing that he nodded, he He then said in a low voice, "First of all, it's for research. In this line of work, all creations created by our own hands, regardless of whether they are failed creations or defective creations, need to be carefully studied to gather more information. The other reason," he laughed bitterly, "well, we can't get rid of those things either. Yun Nuashing and the others. The main reason is that we didn't expect the creations to be so powerful. They went berserk directly after emerging from their mother's womb, and they are even more powerful than me. If it weren't for the fact that they were just born, it wouldn't have been easy for us to suppress them. We could only take advantage of the fact that they couldn't move for a long time and fight them until they were tired, and then press them there to keep them in a weak state. After that, we'll find a way to kill them in the future." As Old Thief spoke, a pale shadow appeared on his face again, and he began to mutter in a low voice, "F***ck the heavens. F***ck my luck. I've been unlucky all my life." Yun Nuashing's cheeks twitched violently, and he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. All right, it wasn't that he couldn't understand this situation. If the heavenly origin god used his own origin and several types of energy to create a life form, there was indeed a probability that it could create a life form more powerful than himself due to the abnormalities between the energies. However, there was also a limit to this. After all, there were rules and restrictions. For example, at his level, he definitely couldn't create a life form that was in the Yuansha realm from the mother's womb, so he could only think that this guy at the fourth sky of origin was really too unlucky. There's still a lot of important information in the lower 3 levels. Now's not the time to think about information. The seal might break in 5 minutes. With their strength, they'll be able to break the seal into particles in less than half an hour after they recover. How unlucky! Heavens! How do I activate that formation? Seeing that the sad guy was still beating his chest and stamping his feet, Yun Nuashing and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They couldn't help but shake their heads, and he took a step forward and said, "Then, if you still have something you want from that place, and if you still have something you want from this moment, how about we make a deal?" Sung. What did you say? Old Thief was stunned when he heard this. He turned his head and saw Yun Nuashing looking at him with a very serious expression. He couldn't help but scratch the hair in front of his forehead again. "What deal?" "Your information." The information about those creations. I only want the basic information, such as energy circulation, the most basic habits, and so on. They have their unique characteristics compared to normal life forms. I don't want that kind of information about a single individual. Also, I need a quota for the soul ascension ceremony. Yun Nuashing finished in one breath. Old Thief was slightly stunned, and his eyes flickered. "Agree to it. That's it. Use my quota." Before Old Thief could speak, Qin Yu spoke first, and the former was slightly stunned. He thought for a moment, weighed it in his heart, and nodded. "This is not a problem. Then, can you solve the problem in front of us?" "Yes." Yun Nuashing nodded. "Do you want to dismantle the entire hall or save a part of it? Is there anything you want to preserve? Is there any special life form that you can't kill? Is there anything you can't fight? Is there anything you can't be scared of? Or, headache. Stop. Don't say any more. I'll go with you. We'll talk after we see it." Old Thief hurriedly waved his hand. He felt a headache coming on when he heard him smash down a series of things. Yun Nuashing thought for a moment and nodded. "That's fine." Old Thief heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He waved his hand and shouted, "Everyone, retreat to the first line of defense. Act according to the deployment just now. Team 6, quickly come back and assist in the defense. You don't have much time left. Don't do anything else before we come back. After 2 hours, retreat without any orders and give up on the prison hall. The core of the 3rd floor has been destroyed, and the prison hall is basically unusable. We have an hour, and after an hour, if we can't succeed, we'll have to retreat. Before that, the prison hall must be banished into the void, or it will affect this space. In the end, whether or not we can activate the suppression formation or save anything, we'll have to retreat. I'll try to reverse the flow of energy from the core and detonate the prison hall when it enters the void, destroying all those things. 2 hours is plenty of time. It's not a problem. Yun Nuoshing shrugged, indicating that there was no pressure at all. Don't worry. Although we came from a low-level area, we are much more powerful than you think. After that, Old Thief handed over the armor and robes again. Yun Nuoshing waved his hand and said, "We don't need these. We can handle it ourselves. You just have to pay attention to your own safety." Old Thief had nothing else to say. He nodded and began to prepare. "I will use the remaining energy of the prison hall to teleport us directly to the 5th floor. We may be attacked as soon as we come out. Be prepared." While he was preparing, the people guarding the front line were also following orders and retreating bit by bit. Some of them were dragging the unconscious creations, and some were retreating with injuries. When they were retreating, they did not forget to take care of the people around them who were also covering for them. They were moving toward the entrance of the 2nd floor where they were. Footsteps were also heard on the 1st floor. A batch of reinforcements had arrived. Among them were those who were dressed like assassins. There were also some who wore a swordsman hat and carried a lot of weapons that did not seem to be useful. There were quite a lot of them. The tragic atmosphere with sorrowful faces made it seem like they were ready to die on the battlefield. The clothes of your family's combatants are still so unique. Qin Yu could not help but say when she saw hundreds of people rushing over. Old Thief laughed dryly and focused on preparing for the teleportation. Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath and extended his hand to Si Yu and Feng Qinghuang. "The road ahead will be a little messy. You two should hide first." The weakest lifeforms they would encounter below were probably early heavenly gods. The strongest lifeforms were a group of uncontrollable lifeforms around the 4th or 5th heavenly layer of origin realm. He did not dare to let Si Yu and Feng Qinghuang follow him carelessly. It would be troublesome if something happened. Hide, where should we hide? The two girls looked at his outstretched hand and subconsciously held it with both hands. Then, they were stunned. Where should we hide? Yun Nuoshing squeezed their soft hands and extended his soul force. He guided them. Relax your soul force. Come, take a breath and slowly exhale. Come in. A transparent light flashed across Si Yu and Feng Qinghuang's body. The two girls rushed into his forehead with their soul force. When they came back to their senses, they saw themselves slowly falling from the sky and landing in a courtyard. They could not help but look at each other. Snore. He also heard a soft snoring sound. Turning his gaze, he saw an extremely dreamy and extravagant bed woven from countless flowers and vines in the courtyard. A young girl with a pair of wings on her back was curled up on the bed of flowers. She was hugging a purple ball that flickered with the light of a nebula. She was sleeping peacefully, and her 3-meter-wide wings covered Dao Heaven's face. The little girl looked as if she was about to be suffocated by the wings, and her body twisted and turned restlessly. Yun Nuoshing and the two girls. Cough, cough. This is my spiritual world. You two can walk around freely, Yun Nuoshing said. After thinking for a while, he said, "This place can build a house. If you want, cough, do whatever you want." Heavens, what did he just say? Now that he said that, wouldn't he see a strange cave or mansion the next time he entered the spiritual world? Don't touch the mountains and rivers in the distance. Don't touch them. Don't touch them, he warned. Those were the origin energies. Heavens, he did not even say anything. He was done for. He was already used to the group of girls causing trouble in his spiritual world. Looking at the two girls whose eyes suddenly became sharp, he guessed that they did not have any good intentions. "Let's go," Old Thief shouted. The teleportation circle flashed fiercely and disappeared with Qing Yu and Yun Nuoxing. The sudden change of vision made Yun Nuoxing, who had turned into a sad person, return to her serious state. A thick layer of energy light appeared in front of them and dissipated little by little, revealing the scene behind. They appeared in midair. It was a huge hall with walls on all sides like the second floor. One of the walls even had an exaggeratedly huge hole. However, there was still a magic circle that barely maintained its integrity. Those creatures with poor brains did not seem to have thought of leaving from there. Below them, they could see many magic circles and domains built by the magic circles. There were also many strange small buildings, but they were all broken. Other than that, there were hundreds of creatures below, all of whom looked particularly ferocious and twisted. Bang! Yun Nuoxing waved her hand casually, and a group of cannon fodder flew out with a force. There was an empty space for them to land. The 5 of them landed uniformly, and began to rub their hands together as they looked at the dangerous creatures that were constantly approaching them. Are there any taboos? Are there any that you can't bear to kill? Are there any special models? If not, I'm going to start fighting? Hui used his elbow to poke Old Thief and opened his mouth to slap Old Thief's face. Old Thief smiled bitterly and quickly looked at the hall on the 5th floor. He shook his head before those strange creatures were about to go berserk. If possible, keep the place. There's nothing else. Okay. Hui responded. His figure turned into a golden light and shot out in an instant. He rushed into the middle of a group of crazy creatures and smashed those strange-looking creatures into pieces. The ground was full of broken limbs. Yun Nuoxing grabbed a creature that looked like a combination of a big turtle and a big octopus that was charging at her face. With a straight punch, she caved in its face and shattered its turtle shell. After confirming that it had fainted, she threw it behind her and clapped her hands before continuing to walk forward. Jing Yuanji waved her hand. The space solidified and smashed down, smashing a large group of creatures into confusion. She waved her other hand again and threw the fainted creatures to the place where Yun Nuoxing had thrown them. Then, she followed the ladder and continued to walk forward. Old Thief was stunned at this moment. Qing Yu still had a smile on her face. Seeing the former in a daze, she patted his shoulder. What are you staring at? If there's anything you want to recycle, go quickly. Oh, recycle. That's right, recycle. Old Thief's body quivered. He hurriedly rushed to those almost dimmed formations and took out a 2-inch-tall triangular black crystal from the core of those formations. Following the appearance of these crystals, those formations that had persisted bitterly until now also quietly disappeared. Yun Nuoxing watched this scene with the back of her head, showing an interested look. The black crystal was the core of the array, recording the information of the array and the information collected during the operation of the array. Although it was not like him, who could get the array to directly feed back the information to him, the advantage was that he could leave a record for others to see. In case the person who set up the array died. Compared with the previous world, the environment here is really kind. Jing Yuanji clapped her hands and said casually, "Finally, there's no more, such an exaggerated number." She made a huge, exaggerated gesture with both hands. She still remembered that after the battle in the spirit-gathering continent, Qing Jun had madly muttered in her ear, "Can't kill them all. Can't kill them all." Thinking about this situation, she felt a headache. Finally, there were not so many things for them to kill here. It would only take a few minutes to clean it up. Yun Nuoxing glanced at her and suddenly pretended to smile profoundly. "Little girl, you're too young. Think about the 2 worlds we've encountered before. Do you think the situation in this world will be easier? No, this is just a remote place, a corner where birds don't lay eggs, and it's just a small hall. Don't forget that we were dealing with the power of the entire world before. This time if he..." After hearing this, Jing Yuanji's legs began to soften. She stared at Lord Feng with tears in her eyes. she instantly felt that she was about to become a tragic figure. If this world also had that kind of power, there would probably be more Origin Realm enemies joining this time. Thinking of that situation, she wanted to faint. Chapter 14-16. The hall was filled with distorted energy that did not dissipate. It seemed to be released by those unstable lifeforms. Compared to the perfectly integrated distorted energy on Qing Yu and the others, the energy that permeated here was more destructive, just like the situation in the spirit-gathering continent. The destructive distorted energy distorted the solid structure of the hall, the corridor, and the walls into a strange painting. Those lifeforms that were blinded by the distorted energy charged at Yun Nuoxing and the others 12 times without any regard for their lives. Then, they were all thrown behind and piled up into a 100-meter-high mountain. They were all unconscious, and only a few dozen of them could not withstand the beating. Only some fragments were casually piled at the bottom of the mountain. Old Crook energetically dealt with the remaining magic circles in the hall that had not been destroyed. He took away all the information that could be picked up, and also some of the limbs of some strange lifeforms on the mountain. Meanwhile, Qing Yu was inspecting the space to see if there was any place that had been missed. However, this destruction is truly thorough. Yun Nuoxing looked around, the distorted energy lingered in the hall, he was too lazy to deal with it. He only opened a barrier to isolate the energy that could only make him feel a little uncomfortable, seeing Jing Yuanji come over. He opened the barrier a little wider. They also walked around the hall, observing the hall and at the same time, bypassing the places where there were traces of cracks and destruction of the rules that were entangled by the distorted energy. This kind of energy was extremely destructive. Just by accumulating this kind of energy, the structure of the hall had already become much weaker. The result of that kind of destruction would only appear after being washed away by time for countless years. Lord Feng, look here. Jing Yuanji suddenly noticed something. She quickly reached out and grabbed Yun Nuoxing's arm. Yun Nuoxing turned his head and saw a sunken hole where Jing Yuanji's finger was pointing. 1/3 of the energy in the hall was gathering there, condensing into a dense mass of distorted energy. At first, the mass of energy should still be on the ground. Now, it had sunk into the ground, breaking a big hole in the floor of the hall. The big hole was not connected to the lower floor, but to the void. There was a high concentration of distorted energy below the hole. Once someone fell in, they would first be washed by the distorted energy. Then, like a typhoon, they would be thrown into the void and thrown to an inexplicable place. Tilting his head to look at Old Thief and Qing Yu who were busy with their work, Yun Nuoxing turned back and waved his hand to erase the distorted area. He casually shook his hand. They were not afraid, but if these two fellows fell down, they might not be able to come up. Casually erasing the danger in the hall on this floor seemed superfluous, but it would make it more convenient for Qing Yu and Old Thief to do their work. Anyway, that level of trouble could be easily dealt with. They were still suppressing their own energy. If they did not suppress it, they would be able to push back the collapsed hall. It's done. It's fine here. My painstaking efforts. The results of these hundreds of thousands of years. Let's go to the next floor. Old Thief waved his hand to indicate that they could go to the next floor. After taking 2 steps, he turned back and looked at the pile of creatures that he had created with his own hand. A sense of sadness arose spontaneously, and he could not help but sigh. His face was full of sorrow. Seeing this, Yun Nuoxing and the others wished that they could use a mass of energy to shut this guy's mouth. After skimming through this place surrounded by distorted energy, the passage to the next floor was slightly safer. There was not too much energy surrounding it. Qing Yu and Old Thief checked their equipment and replenished their energy. After confirming that there was no problem, they continued to follow Yun Nuoxing and the others. After walking down for a few minutes, they suddenly saw something on the ground. Old Thief jumped over and picked it up. His eyes narrowed slightly. This is the sixth floor. Hey, why are there people inside? Didn't you withdraw your men? As soon as Yun Nuoshing and the others walked into the hall of the sixth floor, what rushed into their eyes was the intense, burning, distorted energy. The energy concentration was frighteningly high, and its form changed uncontrollably under such circumstances. Usually, without any guidance, these energies would turn into a sea of fire. It seemed to be burning, but it would not release heat or burn. It would only melt the objects attached to it bit by bit with the high concentration of energy. The situation in the hall of the sixth floor was even more dangerous. Furthermore, there was a light green energy barrier in the hall that was surrounded by dozens of creatures. Inside the barrier were 5 people who were struggling to move forward with difficulty. Their attire was similar to the people that they had seen before they came down. Group 6. Didn't I tell you to retreat? Why did you come to the 6th floor? Everyone immediately rushed into the hall. When Old Thief saw that it was the members of Group 6 who had just sneaked into the 3rd floor to close the core, he could not help but widen his eyes. Out of concern, he was about to take a step forward when Yun Nuoshing suddenly grabbed his arm and pulled it back. A raging, uncontrollable energy suddenly surged in front of him and pierced through the wall at the other end of the hall. Old Thief was so scared that his face was covered in cold sweat. "My lord!" The members of Group 6 who were surrounded also saw the people rushing in from the entrance. Their faces turned pale as they quickly shouted, "My lord, retreat quickly! These beasts are crazy!" Ugh! Before they could finish their words, the crazy creatures that surrounded them were slapped by Yun Nuoshing and the others to the wall at the front of the hall. They were squeezed into skewers, then fell to the ground together and fainted. The members of Group 6 were so shocked that their mouths were wide open. Their faces were blank. However, they could still see that the crisis was over. They immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing Old Thief quickly walking over, the person who was probably the leader saluted and said respectfully, "My lord, the path from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor is completely blocked. We can't delay them until they show a gap, so we can only go down and hope that we can open the suppression circle at the bottom floor. Please punish us for acting without permission." All right, I'll punish you with a hammer." Old Thief waved his hand, and the hall of the 6th floor immediately quieted down. Most of the distorted energy calmed down. He was also surprised. He looked at Yun Nuoshing, only to see him smile and wave his hand. He suddenly understood. Time is of the essence. Hurry up and pack up everything left on this floor. Since you're here, come with us. The leader nodded heavily. As he packed up the runic stones glowing with blue light under his feet, he reported, "The barrier stone still has 70% energy left. It's enough to block a 4th-layer origin source attack for 5 minutes, or a 5th-layer origin source attack for 1 minute. It should come in handy." Yun Nuoshing saw him crouch down to pack up, and only then did he notice that there were a dozen palm-sized stones floating a foot off the ground. Those stones were arranged in a special formation around them, forming a tough energy barrier. It was probably this barrier that allowed Group 6 to last until they arrived. "My lord, the sealed door has been attacked again," a member of Group 6 said in a deep voice. "Since we arrived, the door has already been attacked 13 times. Each attack is stronger than the last. I'm afraid it won't be able to last much longer." Hearing the other party's words, Yun Nuoshing turned his gaze to the front of the hall of the 6th floor. There was a door there, and there was a large amount of spatial energy flowing around the door. The space behind the door was probably no longer a situation of descending stairs. Putting that aside, there was already so much distorted energy inside that he could pinch his nose through the door. The members of Group 6 surrounded the door, but they did not dare to come within 100 meters of it. There was a huge pressure preventing them from advancing. If the energy hidden behind the door suddenly erupted, let alone the 3rd floor or the 6th floor, the energy would probably reach the upper floors of the prison and turn everything into ashes. No matter how I look at it, it doesn't look like it can last for more than 2 hours. Yun Nuoxing quickly walked past the members of Group 6 and walked to the door under their fearful gazes. He took a deep breath and suddenly clenched his right hand into a fist. He slowly raised it and swung it out, as if he was practicing martial arts. He lightly punched the door. Although he said he punched the door, from Jing Yuanji's point of view, he only raised his fist and pressed it against the door. Then, the whole hall quieted down. There was no sound at all. There was no more violent energy at the door, and there was no more movement. It became dead silent all of a sudden. Even Jing Yuanji was stunned for a moment. She didn't feel anything just now, as if the matter was already over. This should be enough. Yun Nuoxing casually clapped his hands. The creatures on the 7th floor and the last 2 floors were completely out of control. These 3 floors were like the deepest part of hell, filled with completely out of control distorted energy. The energy could not be channeled and could not be discharged into the void. It was recklessly tumbling and surging in a narrow space. Sooner or later, the entire fragile hall would be blown away. He heard that they could last for 2 hours, but he personally sensed that the energy riot on the lower 3 floors was probably 100 times more serious than what Old Thief had imagined. With that amount of energy turbulence, the prison hall would become a thing of the past in less than an hour. They would not be able to last until the people above retreated. In this situation where there was an excessive amount of distorted energy, there was no way to contact the people guarding the hall. What are you all standing here for? Yun Nuoxing looked at the stunned members of Group 6 and waved his hand. Time is of the essence now. We have been forced to give up on many things. While we can still move, hurry up and save some things. What are you all standing there for? The leader of Group 6 shuddered and quickly nodded. He grabbed one member in each hand and hurried towards Old Thief to help clean up the broken core of the magic circle and the broken pieces of the creations on the ground. We will go in and take a look. You all can take your time behind. Yun Nuoxing waved his hand at Qin Yu and called Hui over. Then, he slapped the door in front of him. The appearance of the 7th floor appeared in front of them in an instant. As he expected, there was not a staircase or half of a passage behind it. There was another space behind it, a space that was connected to the 6th floor. The connection between the 2 spaces was completely dependent on this portal that had spatial fluctuations. Yun Nuoxing's hands swiped across the door that was more than 10 meters wide to maintain the stability of the portal. Then, he stepped into the space of the 7th floor. With a surge of spatial energy that was not too strong, he could tell that he had walked into another space. He turned his head and saw a wall. The door on this side was still there, but there was an open door hanging on the door. It was as if there were 2 doors here, one was closed and one was open. He had to look at it from the side to notice that there were 2 doors. Then there was the front. Feng, look at these things, they have all turned into sculptures. Hui was jumping on a giant beast that was hundreds of feet tall, waving and shouting at them. Yun Nuoxing also noticed that the creatures on the 7th floor were very different from those they had seen before. They were all engraved with scarlet energy patterns. When he touched the patterns with his hand, he could feel a texture between cotton and sponge. It was also like blood vessels. They were not just engraved on the surface of the skin. These things really grew out of the body. The concentration of distorted energy in this hall was even higher. It was almost tangible, but all of them were frozen in the last scene of them churning, including the dozens of huge deep-sea monsters here. Jing Yuanji only just noticed the strangeness of this hall. All the energy had disappeared, and there was no energy reaction. Even though there were so many lifelike energies in front of her that could be seen with the naked eye, she could not feel any energy at all. She pinched the energy that had solidified into sculptures with her hand and broke off a piece of it. Lord Feng, these sculptures are. She looked at Lord Feng with some confusion. She remembered that he was the one who lightly punched the door, and the whole hall became like this. It's just frozen energy. It's nothing. Yun Nuoxing waved his hand and said casually. He looked up at the many huge sculptures that were close at hand and said, I found that after these creations went out of control, almost 90% of their body structure turned into energy, distorted energy. So, this is the best way to deal with them. Won't it defrost? Jing Yuanji poked a huge sculpture next to her. Yun Nuoxing shook his head. It's completely frozen. Don't even think about moving for 2 days. Leaving the bodies here is purely for them. Yun Nuoxing did not find anything special after observing for a while. He tried to touch the magic circles that were left behind to see if he could touch the core like Qing Yu and the others. The result was that he almost destroyed 2 of the magic circles. Helpless, he could only ignore it as it was not his field of expertise. After the 7th floor, the 8th floor did not have any passageways, stairs, or any other gap. There was not even a portal, and it was directly connected. However, there were no oceanic behemoths on the 8th floor, only broken magic circles and cages. Those behemoths probably squeezed into the 7th floor. There were not many creatures on these 2 floors, but each one was more powerful than the other. Aside from the cages, there were also some unknown pieces of equipment. However, the damage on the 8th floor was more severe. Even though the energy was completely frozen, the space was still in a gloomy and distorted state. Thick smoke drifted, and the ground and walls were left with charred marks from a fire. As for the 9th floor, there was a large door between the 8th and 9th floor. The door was still preserved by a very powerful seal. It was quiet behind the door, but the movement of energy could be felt. The movement is really exaggerated. Hui stood in front of the door, looked up at the 100-meter-tall door, and then looked at the 10,000-meter-high ceiling. He could not help but smack his lips. It was quiet all around, but he said that the movement was very big. Yun Nuoxing did not find anything wrong with it, because the movement was indeed very big. The movement of energy behind the door was not ordinary. It was equivalent to a life form at the peak of the 5th firmament of origin, constantly releasing energy from behind, filling every corner of the 9th floor with energy. The space inside was probably stuffed into a huge body of energy, ready to explode at any time. However, there was no big movement on the surface. Everything was carried out in silence. Yun Nuoxing patted the door and frowned. If we open the door, it will probably explode. The violent energy concentration is very high. If we freeze it rashly, we won't be able to freeze the whole thing in an instant. It will also destroy the balance, and it will also explode. To do that, we need to use more energy. Don't worry. Hui nudged him with his elbow, grinned, and gave him a thumbs up. A real man should be able to open the door fearlessly in the face of the energy of an entire hall. Yun Nuoxing pulled Jing Yuanji back a step and raised his hand high. Please, start your performance. I'm afraid I'll fly out. Then what are you talking about? Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes. The 3 of them were of course not afraid of the level of energy behind the door. Even if it was 10 million times stronger, they would not be afraid. Even if they exposed their chests and took a direct hit, they would be fine. At most, they would be a little embarrassed. The problem was that they did not want to be embarrassed for no reason. Feng Lingjun, wait for me. You're running too fast. Qing Yu's shout was accompanied by the sound of hurried footsteps. Yun Nuoxing turned around and saw a sissy in a white robe running over the collapsing cracks like a girl. The sissy stopped beside him and said without panting, "How did you guys get in so quickly?" "That's the door to the 9th floor. I haven't been here for a long time." "What's behind the door?" Yun Nuoxing pointed at the door with his thumb. It did not move but was actually on the verge of collapse. The movement behind the door is really big. I think that old bastard would be killed if he went in. What did you guys do to create such a level of creation? The 9th floor. Qin Yu looked at the closed door quietly. He could also feel the violent and deadly energy behind the door. He could not help but let out a long breath and said with a nostalgic tone, "There's only one creation on the 9th floor. It's a very smart guy. If there's a problem with the prison hall, it's actually the first to break free. It's also the most dangerous guy in the entire hall." Yun Nuoxing saw that Qin Yu was reminiscing. He held back for a while and did not say anything. Then, Qin Yu said, "Actually, the guy inside has something to do with me." Yun Nuoxing glanced at him and gestured with his chin for him to continue. Qin Yu nodded and looked at the door. "This is a pure failure. It's the first creation of Huode and his brothers after I took over the responsibility." Yun Nuoxing and the other two were stunned. The answer was a little beyond their imagination. Huode, Huashaohua, and the others also have a self-cycle. When they grow to a certain point, they will leave a seed that contains all of them. Their original body will turn into a huge amount of energy and life force and dissipate into the ocean, waiting for the moment of rebirth. The new next generation will carry everything of the previous generation, except for the memories. So, every cycle is actually a new life. But in the past, before I took over the responsibility, there was no such cycle. The previous king, my father, they needed to create the light in the sea, according to an accurate schedule. Huode and the others' efficiency of converting light and heat was very low. It often took more than 30 cycles to maintain the heat of this world. Creations that cannot be cycled are actually failed creations in this world. They do not have a self-cycle and cannot enter the cycle of the environment. Such creations are not recognized. So, when I was chased back and took over the responsibility, I tried to change it. My father and the others had already explored it to a certain extent. I just needed to find a breakthrough. Qin Yu crossed his hands and wrapped his long white robe. He pursed his lips for a long time. Changing them from physical lifeforms to energy lifeforms was actually a breakthrough. It was my idea. But because we had never seen any energy lifeforms, there were many things that we could not understand clearly. Even if we used all our power to deduce, it was difficult to deduce a result out of thin air. But I still did it. The result of my impatience is as you can see. He waved his hand and pointed ahead. The creature that kept emitting violent and distorted energy on the 9th floor was the product of his first mistake. I'm probably lucky. Qin Yu laughed dryly. After the first failure, it took 20 years of dedicated research to create the current big flame, medium flame, and small flame. They have also self-cycled twice and have remained stable. But the first failure is still a result that cannot be erased. Creating lifeforms that had never been seen before out of thin air was a feat that even Yun Nuoxing could not help but applaud. Energy lifeforms were no secret to people like them who had seen many things, but Qin Yu and the others had never seen them before. They probably only had vague memories of the names of such lifeforms. At most, they might know what kind of existence they were, but he had no way of knowing more about the laws and concept. Under such circumstances, it only took 20 years to change a life form from a physical form to an energy form. Even if those in the divine realm knew about the laws and concepts, they would still have to pay a great price to change it. The difficulty was no less than the destructive calamity of entering the realm of reincarnation, let alone Qin Yu and the others. To be honest, it could be considered a miracle to have achieved results after only one failure. And then, Yun Nuoxing waved his hand in front of Hao Ren to snap him back to reality. What happened after the boss of the Triflame clan came out? When Blackfire came out, it was in a completely berserk state. Unstable energy had taken over its body. It was a disaster. Back then, it took the combined forces of the Northern and Southern Empires, as well as 80% of the Eastern Domain's forces to suppress it. The Western Empire did their best to keep this world from being destroyed. In short, it took a lot of effort to imprison Blackfire in the Great Hall of Detention. Qin Yu sighed faintly, his completely calm face looking a little strained. Oh, sorry for interrupting your memories. Yun Nuoxing suddenly reached out and grabbed his arm. Your Blackfire seems to have a problem with your arrival. Huh. Qin Yu tilted his head and was stunned. In just a short while, Yun Nuoxing had pulled him and Jing Yuanji away like a flash of light. Hui also suddenly had goosebumps all over his body as he sensed something. With a loud cry, he followed them out of the 8th floor. Boom! The door that separated the 8th and 9th floors was suddenly blasted into powder by a burst of energy after they rushed out. Monstrous black flames accompanied by scarlet distorted energy flooded the 8th floor like a sea of fire. Hui, who was one step slower but had just left the 8th floor and hid behind Yun Nuoxing's energy barrier, looked at the black flames sweeping over behind him and could not help but wipe his sweat. He looked at Qin Yu in a daze. This resentment is not ordinary. Why don't you go up and say something? Maybe it wants to catch up with you. Out. Yun Nuoxing smashed a fist on the head of the indecent guardian. Looking at the waves of flames and distorted energy that were getting more and more violent, she could not help but shake her head. Looking at the situation, Blackfire did not seem like it wanted to catch up with the past. Maybe it wanted to swallow Qin Yu whole. Chapter 14-17. The monstrous sea of black flames completely occupied the space behind the energy barrier. Within the tumbling flames, there was another type of energy that was even more violent and dangerous. It had turned into an accelerant, causing the flames to burn even more thoroughly. That energy was mixed with several emotions, and they were all emotions that Yun Nuoxing was most familiar with: violence, hatred, and mania. Compared to this kind of crazy energy, the giant beasts on the 7th and 8th floors were simply little lambs. Even Yun Nuoxing could not help but be moved. The feeling of wanting to let his flames burn the entire world simply made him see another version of himself. Bang! A huge energy shock wave erupted from the sea of flames and collided with the energy barrier, causing it to tremble. The energy that exploded turned into black flames that scattered throughout the entire space. Following that, several violent energy shock waves attacked, but they were all blocked by the energy barrier. However, the shock waves produced when the two sides collided caused the walls of the hall to collapse even more severely. Cracks spread to the corners of the walls, and it was likely that this space would not be able to withstand more than a few attacks from the black flames. A sharp and angry roar came from the sea of flames. It was unknown whether it was because they were not in the sea or because the leader of the Three Hu clan was particularly different, but even that voice sounded particularly ear-piercing. The sound waves seemed to contain a powerful shock wave. Hearing this roar, Qin Yu suddenly pressed his ears and squatted down with a pale face. A shock wave in the form of sound. Yun Nuoxing squeaked at Hui. He nodded in understanding and raised his hand to wave it in front of his eyes. The energy barrier flickered because of this. The sound that surged in was still there, but it was not as ear-piercing as before. Yun Nuoxing squatted down and looked at Qin Yu. That ear-piercing impact of the laws had been blocked outside, and he had also caught his breath. Oh, if it wasn't for his face being too pale, Yun Nuoxing wouldn't have been able to determine whether he was fine or not. Damn it, he was just paralyzed on one side. Couldn't he at least show some fear or discomfort at this moment? What was with that incomparably calm expression, as if he was about to sacrifice his life in the next second? Are you all right? Qin Yu tilted her head to look at him and nodded lightly. I'm all right. Qin Yu stood up with Yun Nuoxing's help. He looked at the sea of fire that was constantly attacking the barrier, and couldn't help but sigh. He couldn't see the situation inside, but he could feel a gaze filled with violence and resentment. It had been locked onto him ever since the door to the 9th floor collapsed along with the wall. Its target was him. Although I don't know what you're thinking of. Yun Nuoxing saw a lot of meanings in his eyes. After a while, she turned her head to look at the sea of fire. Don't be silly, lest you add to the trouble. Black fire may be very powerful to you, and it may be a name full of trauma and sadness. But, to put it bluntly, it is not an existence that cannot be destroyed. For us, it won't take much effort to kill it, mainly you. Me? Qing Yu raised his head to look at the side of her face, and his expression changed slightly. That's right, it's mainly him. It's a failure, but it's also your family's child. For now, there are 4 of us here. Well, at most, we can count those who are running over from behind. The biggest decision is yours, Yun Nuoxing said softly. What do you plan to do? Don't say I don't know at this time. This hall looks like it can't hold on any longer. If you hesitate now, something bad will really happen. Yun Nuoxing saw the confusion in his eyes and hurriedly smacked him on the head. If you're a man, then be ruthless. You can either seal it or kill it. Be ruthless. Qing Yu's cheeks trembled slightly, and he smiled bitterly. He looked at the sea of fire that was already unable to restrain its anger, and his brows furrowed slightly. His calm expression finally broke, and he gritted his teeth. Can you subdue it first? Yun Nuoxing saw that he finally showed a different expression, and couldn't help but laugh. Well, I'll leave the rest to you, right? I know. Hui, it's time to work. Oh! Hui laughed and nodded. They were suppressing their strength, but it was about the same level as black fire. This scene was just like the scene in Sua that day. When they were facing the Supreme, they couldn't use their full strength. You don't have to go in. Help to stabilize the space of the hall. Don't let black fire not burn the hall down, but collapse it because of us. Yun Nuoxing patted Jing Yuanji's back, and then rushed into the barrier with Hui in a flash. Jing Yuanji heard the order and subconsciously used her strength to stabilize the space. After a moment, she heard the name clearly, and her expression was a little unnatural, and her pretty face was slightly red. Mei Mao stared at the sea of fire and couldn't help but mutter, Lord Feng is getting closer and closer, stepping lightly on a rolling black fire wave. The flame suddenly broke away from the control of the sea of fire and rushed forward with Yun Nuoxing's footsteps. Hui was 2 meters away from him, floating in the air. The 2 of them stared straight ahead. There was no need to be vigilant of other places. There was no need to look at other places. That guy did not intend to hide his figure, and they did not intend to do so either. The sea of fire in front of them was suddenly pierced by a powerful force, and 2 huge flame pillars came from the front. They hit the space 10 feet in front of Yun Nuoxing and Hui, and exploded into flames. They circled around the 2 of them a few times, and then slowly fell into the sea of fire below. Buzz! The owner of this flame territory let out an angry roar. This time, it sounded a little similar to the sound of the 3 fires, but it had a completely different flavor. In the space hundreds of feet around Yun Nuoxing and Hui, dozens of black fire tornadoes filled with scarlet energy suddenly appeared. The crazy tearing force, accompanied by the energy that was enough to annihilate the rules, crashed towards them from all directions. Yun Nuoxing stretched out his hand and pressed on his long hair and robe that were messed up by the strong wind. He opened his mouth and blew lightly. Before those fire tornadoes could come within 10 feet of him, they once again shattered into sparks that filled the sky. He raised his left hand and lightly snapped his fingers. There was a sudden burst of energy deep in the sea of fire. The monstrous energy was absorbed by the exploding energy ball and turned into a continuous energy shock wave that spread out in all directions, causing the sea of fire to become turbulent. Don't you plan to show yourself? Yun Nuoxing looked at the burst of dazzling energy and showed a strange smile. Energy life forms are extremely rare to you, and there are only 3-4 of you in this world. But to us, energy life forms are as common as cabbages. Do you really think you can deal with us by hiding and locking on to us with your aura? Or do you think this will be safe? There was no movement deep in the sea of fire. Only the energy ball kept releasing violent energy. Yun Nuoshing grinned. "We break its territory." "What?" Hui was stunned for a moment and scratched his head. "You have better control of energy than me." "Why me?" "I'm afraid I'll kill it." Hui blinked. After a moment, he thought of something and said, "Oh, that's true. You don't know how to control your strength." After all, now, seeing that Yun Nuoshing glanced at him with evil intentions, Hui shivered and quickly shut up. Before he was thrown into the sea of fire, he quickly took out the guardian's sword from his chest. The sacred energy turned into a hurricane and swept out. The sea of fire where he stood was pressed down by dozens of feet. The hurricane circled for a while and suddenly turned into circles of tangible energy that swept out in all directions like slow shock waves. Sacred shock. It was not fun to be stared at by a crazy creature that had suppressed its power and his partner. Hui put on an extremely serious expression. The energy was completely condensed in a few breaths. He held the big sword that had become a carrier of sacred energy with both hands. With a light shout, he swung the sword and smashed the space in front of him. The space was like a mirror, and with a soft sound, a large number of cracks appeared. The divine energy rushed into the cracks and the surrounding space at an even faster speed. The cracks were filled with the golden light of divine energy, and they expanded at an astonishing speed. The sea of fire below was condensed into a huge whirlpool by the surging divine energy. When the cracks pierced into the sea of fire, the whirlpool lost its order and was disrupted. A moment later, an earth-shattering sound resounded throughout the prison hall. The space seemed to have turned into a mirror in an instant. At that moment, it was freed from the shackles of the mirror. The sea of fire in the sky retreated toward the space of the 9th floor, as if it was frightened. Yun Nuoshing's motionless figure suddenly turned into a black shadow and swept out. The sea of fire that had spread to every corner of the space of the 2 floors suddenly shrank toward the 9th floor in a dispirited state. It gathered together in the depths of the space and quickly condensed into a huge body. Its complete body had appeared, but it was still relatively dim and transparent, like a shadow and a soul, as if it did not have a physical body. Yun Nuoshing had seen the appearance of that body before. It was exactly the same as Big Fire, except that the color of Black Fire was different. Its entire body was black and scarlet, and its black scales were engraved with scarlet patterns. The lamp hanging on its head also emitted a black and cold light. Yun Nuoshing's figure was like a ghost mixed in with the black flames that were constantly retreating into Black Fire's body. The dark red energy in his hand quickly condensed into a ball. A moment later, the ball began to collapse and continuously gathered toward the inside. Gradually, it condensed into a dark red energy crystal. When it rushed along the sea current to more than 100 meters in front of the huge body, he shouted and threw the energy crystal in his hand. Watching it rush into Black Fire's illusory body along with the flames, he stopped where he was and then turned around and walked outside step by step. Buzz! Everything happened in a short while. From the time when Yun Nuoshing destroyed Black Fire's domain to the time when it condensed its body again, Yun Nuoshing had already walked out for a while. When Black Fire condensed its body again, its pair of eyes that were blurred by distorted energy locked onto Yun Nuoshing, who was casually strolling out below. A hint of brutality suddenly surged in its eyes. Without using any energy to attack, it fell from above like a meteorite. It only remembered to use its black flames while falling. The cold black flames condensed into a densely packed energy spear that pounced toward Yun Nuoshing like raindrop. Just as it was about to attack, Black Fire suddenly heard a faintly discernible voice. Should it be medium rare or medium rare? Qing Yu will probably have to deal with it herself. However, the difference between a 5th heaven and a 2nd heaven is too big. Medium rare doesn't seem to be much of a guarantee. How about 90%? Black Fire's irritable gaze suddenly froze. It looked at the tiny human that was already very close to it. It watched as he ignored all of its attacks. The energy spear rain covered all of his escape route. The violent energy attacks landed on his body, but he didn't dodge or defend himself. It was as if he already knew that the energy attacks wouldn't affect him. Oh, you said medium rare, right? Then let's make it medium rare, heh? The pleasant conversation with a faint smile made Black Fire extremely angry. Just as it was about to turn into a meteorite and fall down, a dark red light suddenly flickered in its body. An indescribable destructive energy emerged from its body, and then it suddenly bloomed. The rich destructive energy swept the distorted energy and Black Fire's energy into the core vortex, igniting every bit of energy and causing a violent chain of energy explosions in its body. The extremely violent destructive energy occupied every inch of its body in an instant. Black Fire's huge body was like a sieve as violent energy attacks erupted from every inch of its body. The excess energy turned into a shock wave and spread out, giving the shattered and almost scarred walls a final blow. The 8th and 9th floors completely collapsed. If it weren't for Jing Yuanji supporting them from the outside, the fragments of the walls would have all fallen down. Yun Nuoxing, Hui, and Black Fire might have been crushed under the rubble. The huge destructive energy from Black Fire's body completely crushed the power of the rules it controlled, as if it had swallowed a bomb. Even its own energy was completely ignited. Part of it was used to detonate the explosion, and the other part was thrown out of its body by the energy. Black Fire's huge, bruised body emitted a dark red energy light, like a falling spaceship drawing a diagonal line in the air, as it fell toward the 7th floor. As it fell, it kept dropping debris. Those scales and black furballs fell down like the parts of a collapsing spaceship. Yun Nuoxing's energy transformed into an umbrella, blocking the scales and the huge dark ball of light that were about to smash down on his head. The surrounding space trembled as the huge object streaked across the space above his head. He couldn't help but raise his head. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of a black shadow from the corner of his eye. He was stunned for a moment. He only had time to see the back half of Black Fire's dark body. A piece of its tail that looked like a ray fell and hit his face, making him feel depressed. Yun Nuoxing took off the huge piece of tissue that was stuck on his face. He sniffled and was stunned. That's not right. Why is it 90% done? Hui helped him carry the piece of tissue forward. When he heard what Hui said, he couldn't help but say, I told you that you don't know how to control your strength. That's why I let you roast it 70%. Isn't it 90% done? If I let you roast it 90% at the beginning, Black Fire wouldn't even have a breath left. Yun Nuoxing's eyes drifted. This. I understand. Well, I can't calculate it so accurately when I'm suppressing the energy. I tried my best. Hey, anyway, you don't know how to control your strength. Hey. Stop. I'm wrong. Don't hit me. Do you want to know the real reason? Yun Nuoxing raised his hand and was about to beat him up. He was slightly stunned when he heard Hui's words. He looked at Hui, who was holding his head with one hand and holding the skate-like thing with the other. He frowned. What's the real reason? You don't know how to control your strength. Okay, I'll say it for the last time. Put down that stick. Hui pointed at him and trembled as he stepped back. Yun Nuoxing waved the stick in his hand. He curled his lips and put it away. Ahem. Hui coughed softly and looked at him seriously. He said, Since you controlled the origin energy, I've noticed that your control over your own energy is getting worse and worse. Yun Nuoxing frowned. He lowered his head and looked at his hands. He squeezed them hard, allowing some energy to circulate in his body. A moment later, he shook his head. I don't feel that way. I feel that everything is fine. Well, it's the origin energy after all. It's normal that you can't feel it clearly. But I can see it very clearly. Hui shrugged. But I can't help you too much. I don't know much about the problem of the origin energy. You can only solve this by yourself. Take the origin energy and your own energy apart and see. I can only give you some hints that you can think of. Hui took 2 or 3 steps away and looked at Yun Nuoshing, who was deep in thought. He could not help but say, "Otherwise, you can't explain the situation where your strength is getting worse and worse. It's true. You just didn't notice it. Recently, there hasn't been any battle that's worth you using your full strength. Plus, I've been fusing with you to make up for this small flaw. So we didn't notice it." Well, I just noticed it. If he didn't mention it, I wouldn't have noticed it. Without waiting for Yun Nuoshing to come back to his senses, the little angel whispered in his soul again. He looked at the mountains, lakes, and rivers in the distance of the spiritual world and could not help but shake his head. Although the origin energy was a good thing, the most frightening thing was that it could not withstand it. And according to the current situation, perhaps a little bit of drawback had already emerged. Since both people had said so, it seemed that it was not wrong. Moreover, one of them was sleeping in his soul. He could not help but let out a long sigh. When the black fire in front of him hit the energy barrier and ended with a violent roar, he looked up and clenched his hands hard. His arms were cracking all over. After that, he walked forward as if nothing had happened. "Forget it. We'll talk about it when the time comes." Hui heard the indifferent and fearless voice behind him. He could not help but turn around. He saw someone walking with his head half raised and looking at the world with disdain. Hui was stunned for a moment. Forget it. You mean, anyway, I'm not the one who's going to die. What does it have to do with me?" Yun Nuoshing spread his hands with a look of disdain. "First, it won't affect me from casting the magic circle. Second, it won't affect me from beating people up. It's just a matter of whether I'm serious or not. It won't affect my energy circulation, right? Why do you care so much? We'll talk about it when we have time. It won't affect me if it doesn't affect me from beating people up." Huey's face twitched violently. This guy had chosen the option of not being a human again. After all, they were going to die. Wait, that's not right. Anyway, those things that he had to deal with now did not need to be treated as humans. So what if they died? But why did it sound a little awkward? The energy barrier had been lifted. Qing Yu trotted in front of the black fire when it fell. When she saw that it was on the verge of death, her hand trembled slightly. Yun Nuoshing looked at the master and pet. He could not help but sigh softly. He looked at Jing Yuanji and nodded. Jing Yuanji knew what that look meant without any instructions. She nodded gently and took 2 steps forward to guard the place in case there were any accidents. Yun Nuoshing glanced at Qing Yu, who didn't know what expression she should show. In short, that extremely calm expression finally collapsed. Looking at her somewhat delicate and pitiful appearance, he sighed and pulled Hui towards the 9th level. He didn't really want to see that scene. Chapter 14:18. The 9th floor of the prison hall was so clean that there was no debris. Standing at the door, one could see the damaged walls of the hall, the shattered floor, the debris, and the things that existed on the 9th floor had disappeared along with the black sea of fire. It was clear at a glance that it was a mess and there was nothing left. It's so clean. That fire burned everything away. Hui walked beside Yun Nuoshing on the collapsed floor of the hall. He tapped the ground with the tip of his foot from time to time, and all the dangerous cracks on the ground disappeared. As for the wall, there was no need to repair it. After a while, when Jing Yuanji opened up the frozen space, this place would collapse like a skyscraper that had lost its skeleton. Then, it would probably float in the void. Probably a part of it was actually me who got rid of it. Yun Nuoshing thought for a while and laughed self-deprecatingly. Then, she shook her head. But it's really too clean, But it's not like there's nothing left. Look, isn't there something left? Yun Nuoshing raised her hand and pointed to the depths of the hall on the 9th floor. Hui looked inside and couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Wow, that thing! What is that thing? In the hall on the 9th floor, there was a crystal pagoda hanging from the ceiling. It looked very magnificent and towering, but it was hanging upside down from the ceiling. The huge base of the pagoda was separated orderly on the ceiling, forming a circle about 1,000 meters wide. It fell in circles, spanning a height of almost 10,000 meters and landing about 10 meters off the ground. It looked a little like a very sharp and thin stalactite. The crystal pagoda was emitting a crystal clear blue light, and there was a light film like an energy barrier covering its surface. As time passed, it flashed brightly and dimly as if it was breathing. The crystal pagoda was illuminated by the bright and dark light until it revealed its transparent body. At the base of the ceiling, there were circles of blue light spreading out in an orderly manner, sweeping across the entire hall of the 9th floor. It looked very beautiful. It's a carrier similar to our energy pagoda. Based on the information at hand, its body is probably made using the magic circle and runic stone of this world. It's a completely non-physical thing, but I can't see any traces of magic circle or runic stone. It's a little strange. Could it only exist in the core? Yun Nuoxing looked at the beautiful crystal pagoda and didn't analyze it deeply, lest she saw other people's secrets. Suddenly, she thought of something, blinked, and took a few steps back. As she took a few steps back, she said, "I didn't see this thing just now. How could I not see such a magnificent thing? I can't see it now. Hui, try taking a few steps back." Hui heard her and took a few steps back. When he retreated to Yun Nuoxing's side, he was surprised to find that the beautiful crystal pagoda had disappeared from his sight, as if he had never seen it before. What's the reason? Hui scratched his head in puzzlement. He basically couldn't solve this kind of problem. After all, his brain wasn't as good as Feng's. There can be many kinds of situations, but I don't know what kind of situation this crystal pagoda is in. Yun Nuoxing shook her head and didn't say anything about the crystal pagoda. She took a step forward and saw that the crystal pagoda was indeed there, safe and sound. She turned around and was about to go back and call Qing Yu or Old Thief over when she suddenly stopped. She couldn't help but lower her head and sigh. Hui saw her strange action and also turned around. His eyes saw that there was a large amount of energy light disappearing from the 8th floor. Countless energy particles rose from the sea of light and flew into the air. After releasing energy and life force, they dissipated in this space. More and more particles flew up. It was as if an ocean of light had risen from the ground. There were energy halos being released continuously. It was a beautiful sight. So beautiful. Hui couldn't help but sigh softly. Unlike the funeral of a god, this was the scene of the eldest of the 3 Flames clans passing away. Although the dazzling energy phenomenon wasn't as grand and magnificent as the former, it was also the first time they had seen a funeral that could be considered beautiful. The other funerals were mostly grand and filled with endless sorrow. Perhaps there were also many obsessions. Even with the distortion energy turning it into a strange appearance, this rain of light is still so pure. Yun Nuoxing heard and nodded. When the energy life disappeared and returned to the void, it was at its purest. Jing Yuanji stood in the sea of light and looked at the light particles drifting to every corner. When she saw them dissipating into the void, she also lowered her head slightly. Qing Yu squatted at the side and didn't say a word. A large amount of energy particles leaked out from between her fingers. That action looked like she was praying, but she wasn't sure if this world had such a praying posture. Old Thief and the members of Group 6 who rushed over from behind also saw the dazzling energy rain of light. They all let out a long sigh of relief and lowered their heads. They clenched their fists and patted their chests. They murmured, "Buddy, have a safe journey. Thank you for everything you have done for this world." There was an aura of life disappearing in the rain of light. It wasn't a cycle of life and there was no rebirth. In the rain of light where black flame disappeared, there wasn't an aura of life cycle. It was a complete death and self-disintegration. Yun Nuoshing also didn't know what Qin Yu said or did to Black Flame at the last moment. He only knew that this was the result. A few minutes later, when the rain of light completely disappeared, Old Thief slowly walked forward. He looked at Qin Yu, who was still squatting there with her hands clasped together, and didn't say a word. He couldn't help but sigh. He also squatted down and pressed on her shoulder. "Cheer up, there's still time." Yun Nuoshing and Hui slowly walked closer. Their eyes caught a glimpse of a dim light in Qin Yu's clasped hands. They couldn't help but be stunned. The light was very dim. It was impossible to see it with normal eyes. It was a very weak light of energy that could dissipate at any time. There was no aura of life. Of course, it was probably a light left behind by Black Flame. He couldn't say comforting words for a long time. He could only say directly, "We found a strange crystal pagoda on the 9th floor. Do you know what it is?" Crystal pagoda? Old Thief was slightly stunned. He looked at the members of Group 6 with puzzled eyes. They all shook their heads. "I've never heard of any crystal pagoda on the 9th floor. And we usually don't go to the 9th floor. That space hasn't been opened for many years." Yun Nuoshing tilted her head and shrugged. "You'll know when you see it. I don't know what happened between you two. When you walk halfway to the 9th floor, you can see the crystal pagoda. Before that, you can't see it. You guys go and see it first." Old Thief nodded and waved his hand to let the members of Group 6 go first. He stood up and looked at Qin Yu, who still hadn't recovered. He couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. What was helpless was that he didn't know how to comfort people. Squeaking was already the best he could do. Yun Nuoshing looked at Qin Yu and felt a sense of loss and sadness from him. He suddenly wanted to see what kind of expression he had at this moment. He had hurriedly caught a glimpse of his pitiful expression when he turned around. Now, he was suddenly very interested. He really wanted to see what kind of expression he had after breaking through the bottleneck. Thus, he let his curiosity push him and slowly squatted down to look at his face. Well, he was disappointed. He didn't see any other expression. Qin Yu's eyes were closed at this moment. His bangs hung down and covered some of his face. His face was still as calm as ever, but in that calmness, there was a hint of sadness and nostalgia. He completely didn't know how Qin Yu could make such a difficult expression. As expected of the 10,000-year facial paralysis. Speaking of which, it didn't look like facial paralysis at all. When Quarter Moon's mentality exploded in the middle of her life, she was a real facial paralysis. Her face was engraved with undispersible coldness and murderous intent. That was probably because Qin Yu was too calm at the bottom of his heart. That was why he could make such an expression. It was as if he wouldn't panic even if the void collapsed in front of him. Inexplicably, Yun Nuoshing took a light breath. He reached out and patted Qin Yu's shoulder. He said softly, "Come back to your senses, Qin Yu. Right now, it's not the end yet. The main hall isn't safe. You." Before he could finish speaking, Qin Yu slowly raised his head. As he expected, he revealed a face that was as calm as ever. He forced a smile and nodded. "Let's go to the 9th floor and take a look." The group quickly arrived at the 9th floor. The rumbling sounds of the main hall collapsing were endless. Apart from the repaired floor, the walls and ceiling had all collapsed to varying degrees. Layers of debris were piled up on the floor. The distorted energy outside the main hall was constantly trying to burrow into the hall through the holes in the walls. However, it was blocked by a transparent blue barrier. Even after several powerful attacks, it still couldn't make a single hole in the barrier. The speed of the main hall's collapse was a little beyond Old Thief and Qin Yu's imagination. They didn't waste any time talking and quickly arrived at where the members of Group 6 were standing. They raised their heads and saw the crystal pagoda. Yun Nuoshing also looked at the crystal pagoda again. This time, he found that it was made up of countless pieces of energy plates of different lengths and width. However, the thickness was exactly the same. Countless types of energy plates were piled up to form the crystal pagoda that was hanging upside down from the ceiling. The cracks on the ceiling wouldn't spread to the crystal pagoda for a while, but it wasn't too far away. How is it? Have you figured out what it is? Old Thief looked at the members of Group 6 and asked. The leader of Group 6 frowned and shook his head vigorously. I don't know. I don't know at all. This crystal pagoda is also a kind of energy creation. However, its purity isn't something we can achieve. We don't even know what its function is. When did such a thing appear on the 9th floor? Old Thief frowned fiercely. He was completely sure that such a thing wasn't present when the main hall was first built. It wasn't present when it was first built. It doesn't exist in your memories either. No one would come here if there wasn't anything happening on the 9th floor. Yun Nuoshing looked up for a while and suddenly said, Could it be something made by black fire? Although it wasn't a good time to mention this name, there wouldn't be any clues if he didn't mention it. He could only make such a guess. However, he quickly came up with a second guess. Or, it appeared here for some unknown reason after the core riot. If you're sure that it's not something you made, why don't you let us take a look? Old Thief tilted his head and glanced at Qingyu. The latter pondered for a moment and also tilted her head to look at him. She then nodded. If that's the case, then I'll leave it to you, Lord Fengling. Yun Nuoshing nodded and slowly floated up from the ground. Dark red energy formed a layer of energy barrier around him to prevent any accidents from happening. He quickly came to the top of the crystal pagoda and looked at the cylinder surrounded by 4 crystal plates at the top. After looking at it for a while, he reached out his hand and gently touched it. There was no reaction and no change. The crystal pagoda didn't seem to have any excessive reaction to his touch. Yun Nuoshing observed for a moment, then carefully used energy to wrap his soul power and poured it into the crystal pagoda. After a moment of contact, he received some information that was worth his attention. This was indeed an external object. Just as he guessed, after the core exploded, most of the energy turned and rushed into the prison hall. Putting aside the reason for the energy explosion, all of it rushed here purely because it was attracted by the energy of the black fire. That huge amount of distorted energy and the energy of the black fire that was exposed to the 9th floor had an inexplicable reaction. In the end, it formed this kind of energy crystal. He couldn't see the specific process of the formation of the energy crystal and couldn't analyze it. To be honest, he also felt that it was very strange. What kind of characteristics did the first generation distorted energy and the third generation distorted energy have to cause such a strange change? If not, then the first generation distorted energy and the creation of the black fire. What kind of inexplicable connection did they have? In the end, he couldn't figure out the relationship between these kinds of energy. The only thing he knew was that it was an energy crystal formed by energy. Nearby. Oh, there was nothing else. Also, the energy concentration of this thing was very high. Oh, this was nonsense. How could the concentration of energy be low if it could condense into an energy crystal? Really, other than these, he couldn't summarize anything else. After a moment, Yun Nuoshing landed on the ground. Hui, Qingyu, and the others hurriedly came over. How is it? What's the situation? Yun Nuoshing shook his head. I'm not sure. That thing is an energy crystal formed by the combination of 2 kinds of energy. One kind of energy is the energy of the black fire, and the other is the energy released by the core explosion. Everyone was slightly stunned. How did these 2 things, which sounded very different, come together? The energy of the core explosion was attracted by the energy of the black fire. Yun Nuoshing continued. This is not an accident or a coincidence. It's an inevitable event. It's just that we don't know the situation. We don't know how these 2 kinds of energy are related, so we can only call it a coincidence. Boom, the remaining violent and distorted energy in the prison hall, or the fighting on the first and second floors, awakened everyone from their contemplation. Everyone looked at each other. Qin Yu looked at Yun Nuoxing. Feng Lingjun, is there a way to dismantle this crystal tower? Dismantle. The corner of Yun Nuoxing's eyes twitched. He looked up at the crystal tower in front of him and frowned. Some silver-white light surged in his eyes. He stared at the crystal tower for a moment and understood more. This thing would maintain a regular integrity. Even if it was dismantled into thousands of pieces, as long as its regularity was not broken, it would be complete. This thing looks like it's fixed here. How do we move it back? Tear down the ceiling? Hui scratched his head. He also felt a headache looking at this indomitable crystal tower, although he could also see that the crystal tower had a self-preserving characteristic. Break it, move it out, and put it back together? You're dismantling it into thousands of pieces. Even if you can put it back together, I won't do it with you. Yun Nuoxing's face darkened. How long would it take to put it back together if it was dismantled into thousands of pieces? Those parts almost all looked the same. Then how do we do it? Hui floated around the crystal tower and poked it with his finger from time to time. Old Thief and Qin Yu were scared out of their wits. They were afraid that he would poke the crystal tower in the next second. Then, such a huge tower would turn into a sky full of crystal fragments and fall down. It would probably bury them all alive. Yun Nuoxing swayed in place for a while. She subconsciously twirled her hair with her fingers. There were rays of light in her eyes. She was probably thinking of a solution in her memory. Hui, come down. I've thought of a solution. Yun Nuoxing's eyes turned silver. Her footsteps stopped at this moment. Then, she raised her head and shouted at the guy who was flying around the crystal tower like a fly. Yun Nuoxing, who took a few steps forward and was about to do something, suddenly thought of something. Her expression became a little strange. Then, she tilted her body and waved at everyone. Go, turn around. Don't look. What? What's so fun about it? Why don't you let me look? Hui went up with the word, asking for a beating on his head. He circled Yun Nuoxing twice with a mischievous smile and poked her back with his elbow. Hurry up, don't be shy. What? Yun Nuoxing kicked Hui 10 meters away. Her face was slightly red. She pointed at those confused guys. Hurry up. Turn around. Don't look. Old Thief, Qin Yu, and the others trembled and quickly turned around. Old Thief also pressed the head of a certain guy from Group 6 who was not afraid of death. Yun Nuoxing saw that Jing Yuanji also obediently turned around. After confirming that Hui did not intend to get up for a while, she walked forward with relief. Her figure floated to the top of the crystal tower. This thing is too big. He looked at this huge crystal tower and couldn't help but blush. Even if he really had a way to preserve this thing, its size was too big. He couldn't help but lower his head and measure his body with his gaze, especially his height. He hesitated for a while. The sound of the hall collapsing made him come back to his senses. The hesitation on his face faded away. He took a deep breath and paused for a moment. Then, he suddenly turned around to look at everyone. After confirming that no one was looking back, he heaved a sigh of relief. His figure slowly turned silver-white. In the energy form, he completely released his soul and spirit. These two types of powers suddenly lost their restraints and spread out. They stuck to the crystal tower and enveloped the entire crystal tower in a few seconds. Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and reached out to touch the small cylinder at the top of the crystal tower. Then, she slowly opened her mouth a little. The crystal tower that was enveloped by soul and spirit suddenly trembled. The top began to turn into a gray stream of air. The main body was separated and contained in the gray stream of air. Following the guidance, it flowed into her mouth. She didn't actually eat it into her body, she just stored it in her energy form. This was a special ability of energy life forms, but it wasn't used often. Who liked to put things into their body for no reason. It looked weird. However, this thing couldn't be stored in the soul world or spirit world, so she could only bring it into her body. Moreover, not just any energy life form could do this kind of thing. If one didn't have good enough control over their own body and their own laws weren't strong enough, it was easy for them to break down the things that they ate or not be able to break them down and end up in their stomachs. Jing Yuanji felt a strange energy movement behind her. Just as she was about to turn her head, she suddenly remembered Lord Feng's words. She forced herself to hold it back. Her jade-like fingers touched each other and kept twisting. The curiosity and worry in her heart continued to grow, making the turning of her head more and more obvious. After struggling for about a minute, she finally couldn't help but turn her head. Then, she saw the strange scene. At that time, only 1/3 of the crystal tower was left. The speed at which the crystal tower turned into gray stream of air was getting faster and faster, and it quickly flowed into Lord Feng's mouth. This glance satisfied her curiosity, but she couldn't help but keep staring. It wasn't until she saw that the tower was about to completely disappear that she suddenly snapped back to reality. She quickly turned her head and took a deep breath. She calmed herself down, her heart didn't beat wildly, and she didn't pant. She pretended that she didn't see anything. After swallowing the entire crystal tower into her body, Yun Nuoxing wiped the corner of her mouth and let out a long breath. The silvery white color on her body gradually faded. Then, she touched her body with a strange expression. I keep feeling a little weird somewhere. That thing's existence capacity is much larger than I thought. I feel like my stomach is a little bloated. It won't hurt your stomach, right? Oh, that's not right. According to the structure of energy life forms. Well, my brain is a little bloated. It won't hurt my brain, right? Chapter 14-19. Yun Nuoxing and the others were running back from the Great Hall of Detention. As they passed through the first and second floors, they finished the battle that had yet to end, before rushing out of the Great Hall of Detention. Like birds and beasts, they flew out of the Great Hall of Detention. Only a few of them were still running along the long bridge, only stopping when they reached a safe place and turned to look at the Great Hall of Detention, which was emitting dull energy blasts as if someone was having a stomachache. Bang! The long bridge that connected the Great Hall of Detention was blown apart. Old Thief waved his hand and cut off the connection between the Great Hall of Detention and this dimension, eliminating the ticking time bomb and banishing it into the void. The frozen creations inside had no chance of escaping. Even if they did escape, they would be trapped by the Great Hall of Detention and finally disposed of by the void. However, Old Thief would not feel at ease if he did not personally see them being buried in the void along with the Great Hall of Detention. Sigh. If I had known this would happen, why would I have created them all those years ago? Old Thief watched as the Great Hall of Detention slowly sank into the void fissure, and could not help but sigh with his hands clasped behind his back. That feeling of sadness once again welled up in his heart. Those are children. They were born here following our orders. They had no choice whether it was good or bad. Qin Yu's hands were still clasped together, the dim light still existing between her palms. They sacrificed themselves to maintain this world. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to reach where we are today. At this final juncture, let's send them off. And to send Black Flame off. Perhaps that was not what they wanted, and none of them wanted to see it. Everyone had imagined that they could do the best the first time, but the result was that the dark Great Hall of Detention sealed the truth of their countless failures. The results of deformities, distortions, and failures were facts that could not be concealed. They were mistakes that they had created, mistakes that could not be remedied or corrected. In the end, they still had to bury them with a single oblivion. Old Thief let out a long sigh and reached out to pat Qin Yu on the shoulder. Forget it. Let's not think about that. Let's send the children off. We have more important things to do, it's almost time. Qing Yu let out a long sigh as well, and paused when she heard that. Almost time? Hasn't it just been a while? There's a change of plans. Old Thief's expression changed and became extremely solemn. The person we sent out last time has mysteriously disappeared. Before he disappeared, he kept a set of coordinates through his soul. It's the coordinates of a place that no one has been to before. His soul stone has already shattered. I'm afraid. Qing Yu's face was still calm. She frowned without any change in expression. Assassinated. We can't rule out the possibility of an accident. We can't be sure without more information. Anyway, that's the only clue we have this time. We're trapped in the dry well, looking at the sky from the bottom of the well. We can't fully understand what's going on outside. Old Thief let out a deep sigh. He had just buried the great prison hall, and now he was talking about this. It was inevitable that he would be in a bad mood. I've been thinking about it. 5 days at the latest, or maybe tomorrow at the earliest, we'll have to send another person out. The Corps' rebellion, and the anomaly that happened a while ago. With all these signs, we might not have much time left in the land of exile. Qing Yu nodded. I know. That's why I'm going out again. You're going again? Haven't you always? Old Thief was stunned. He felt a little surprised and shook his head. No, it's too dangerous. You've already been chased back here by that guy with 3 words. You won't be branded as a sinner if you use the Spirit Ascension ritual, but there's already a record of you. It won't take them much effort to find you. Qing Yu chuckled. It's fine. This time, Lord Feng Ling and the others will take me out with them. With them. Although I'm not sure how strong they are, at least I see some hope. Go out together? The Spirit Ascension ritual can only send one person out, and it'll take at least 2 or 3 days for them to recover. The 4 of us have been out for almost 10 days, and it's not easy to get out. Old Thief scratched his head hard, pulling out another bunch of hair. He spoke while looking for a loophole to exploit. But after thinking for a long time, he couldn't think of anything. In his memory, there was no example of a Spirit Ascension ritual sending multiple people out at once. I think there should be a way. They have a way. Qing Yu thought about the scene where Yun Nuoxing turned the 2 little girls into nothingness. He nodded. There shouldn't be a problem. All right. After scratching his forehead until it was bald again, Old Thief sighed heavily and nodded. If you go, the other 2 old fellows won't have any objections. After all, you've already gone out once. This time, the 3 great empires will do their best to help you. You guys, I'll leave this matter to you. Also, without waiting for Qing Yu to respond, Old Thief suddenly said in a deep voice and patted him on the shoulder. Be careful. I know. Qing Yu nodded. The void crack had already closed, and the prison hall had sunk into the depths of the void. There, the laws of the void would devour all defenseless fellows. That prison hall and the creations inside would all be annihilated. Yun Nuoxing's aura left behind in the prison hall observed that the void energy had mixed with the remaining distorted energy, causing an energy explosion. A part of the void was reduced to a land of nothingness. The energy shockwaves spread out for a limited distance in the void before gradually being annihilated. The entire process lasted less than 10 minutes. After coming out of the prison hall, Yun Nuoxing borrowed a place from the Old Thief and spat out the crystal pagoda. Moreover, this time it was placed face up on the ground. The magnificent crystal pagoda almost reached the ceiling of this space. Oh, it looks even more majestic from the front. Old Thief looked up at the huge crystal tower and couldn't help but exclaim. And I finally don't have to twist my neck to see a stiff pillow. Yun Nuoxing and the others. Yun Nuoxing coughed softly and rubbed her stomach. After regaining her senses, she scratched her head. Although she had spat out everything, she still felt that something was wrong with her body. It might be a psychological effect. I've left some energy imprints in this crystal pagoda for observation purposes. You can also use the energy imprints to study the crystal pagoda. You can also use it to communicate with me. If anything happens, remember to inform me immediately. Yun Nuoshing pointed at a few places on the crystal tower. The places she pointed at would emit a light of energy, indicating that there was an energy imprint there. My intuition tells me that this thing might reveal something important, but it will take a long time to analyze it. I don't have that much time now, so I can only leave it to you. Something important. Old Thief met her gaze and looked at the crystal tower in confusion. He was still confused when he looked at this thing. He didn't know where to start studying it. Intuition. My intuition is very accurate. This might reveal a secret about the land of exile. If possible, you should stop what you are doing and let everyone help with this thing. Yun Nuoshing raised his head. He still held back a little. That secret might be related to the land of exile, but his subjective consciousness was that this could reveal some connections between the distorted races and these second and third generation creations. Some connections that stood on the rules or concept. If they used it well, they might be able to obtain an effective way to deal with the distorted races. Seeing that he looked serious and didn't seem to be lying, Old Thief muttered to himself for a moment and couldn't help but look at Qin Yu. Seeing him nod solemnly, he was a little confused. Why did this sissy trust these people from the lower regions so much? Alright, they were strong enough. That was enough. Okay, we'll listen to you. We'll leave some people to maintain daily affairs. The rest of us will do our best to deal with this crystal tower. If anything happens, we'll tell you. Old Thief nodded and revealed a bright smile. By the way, there's something else that Qin Yu wants me to tell you. Old Thief suddenly put on a serious and solemn expression. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. The next moment, he heard Old Thief talking about leaving the land of exile. He couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. After taking a big detour, they could finally get out. Moreover, he caught some hints of anxiety and nervousness in Old Thief's words. He thought about it and felt that they might also know that the land of exile couldn't hold on for much longer. After handing over a lot of things and receiving a lot of information, Yun Nuoshing and the others left the independent space under the sea and followed Qin Yu back to his palace. They rested and strolled around the palace. Qin Yu didn't rest when he came back. Instead, he ran to the place where he kept some record. He was probably preparing to go to the outside world again tomorrow. It felt like he was cramming before an examination. It wasn't that he couldn't understand. This wasn't something a mere test could compare to. If someone else knew that they would be thrown into a dangerous place filled with countless traps, no matter how strong they were, there would still be life forms stronger than them. Furthermore, there were more than 100 or 200 life forms of this level in a place where they could provoke them at any time. No matter how prepared they would still be a little nervous. Anyway, Yun Nuoshing thought that this guy was just a little nervous. Jing Yuanji left the palace with Si Yu and Feng Qinhuang to play in the city. Hui wandered around the ocean planet alone. He didn't want to go anywhere, so he stayed and read the records with Qin Yu. It was all precious information that the people who left the land of exile had painstakingly sent back. However, as Old Thief said, these pieces of information were just pieces of a puzzle. It was difficult to piece them together. No matter how much they speculated, they were just frogs in a well. Only the information that Qin Yu brought back last time was more reliable. Even so, he didn't dare to say that he fully understood the world on the other side. Look at this scene. Yun Nuoshing was a little absent-minded. He raised his head and looked out of the window. There was a pile of bookcases beside him. He was reading and studying this world here. It was just like him in this life when he was Yun Nuoshing. He wondered what Little Moon and Xian were doing over there. The shower of stars was probably not over yet. He wondered if the demon world would come out to stir up trouble. Demon world, ancient imperial world. He murmured these two names in his heart. At least the ancient imperial world in the Dark Age was still the ancient imperial world. He just didn't know what happened later that made it become the demon world. The demon world was already notorious in the primordial age. It could only be that something happened in the Dark Age that caused that place to become so fierce. Sigh. What's wrong? Qin Yu heard his sigh and asked. Yun Nuoxing tilted his head and saw that he was still flipping through the book with his head down. He was looking at him from the corner of his eye. The red glow of the setting sun shone on his face, making it seem a little rosy. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. This sissy was really... he didn't seem to have the right to criticize others. Are you tired of reading? Qin Yu raised his head and asked when he didn't answer. Yun Nuoxing shook his head and put the book in his hand aside casually. He looked out of the window and looked at the sky that looked like a sunset without the sun. He squinted his eyes and said, "No, I'm not tired of reading. It's just that I'm thinking about some things. The more I think about them, the more I can't continue reading." You miss your family? Qin Yu smiled understandingly. That's how it is for those who come from the lower realms. I'm more or less the same. It's just that the situation is reversed. Father and the others came here first, while I came here 10,000 years later. Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly. Family? I don't know if they count as family, but I guess they do. Where are they? After I took over my duties, I went to other worlds to play and see what's going on in other world. I don't know where they are now. Qin Yu shook his head helplessly. However, no matter how hard I run, I probably won't be able to leave this place of exile. My father and the others want to escape this prison the most. When I went out and was chased back here, I was even scolded badly. Haha. So, you want to solve the problem of the place of exile as soon as possible. After all, your family could be buried with this space at any time. Yes, so I have to find a way to solve this problem. Qin Yu closed the book and nodded. There's not much time left. This time, going out, this time, it's going to be very dangerous. Last time, I was thrown back here because I ran into some taboo. If I fail this time, I probably won't be able to come back. Yun Nuoxing tilted her head to look at him. After a moment, she picked up the book that had just been placed on the table and casually flipped through it. She seemed to say casually, "Qin Yu, have you thought about some more complicated things?" Qin Yu was stunned. What things? For example, this world, the existence of the place of exile, and the enforcers. Qin Yu pursed his lips. He had indeed thought about this problem. However, this problem was basically shelved and could not be easily touched upon. Even if he could, no one would come out to answer this question. This was the taboo of taboo. He suddenly paused and raised his hand to carve something on the window. There's no need for that. A faint voice stopped him. Qin Yu turned his head and saw him leaning against the table with his back to him. He was casually flipping through the book in his hand. The orange-red sunlight set off his beautiful face, making him look like a dream. His fluorescent eyes always contained a hint of laziness, as if he did not care about anything. However, there was also a deep and indelible obsession in them, a pair of eyes that no one could see through. Noticing his long stare, Yun Nuoxing turned his head. His hair fell diagonally with his movement. He looked at Qin Yu and laughed. Don't worry about me. I'm much stronger than you think. It's just a mere artificial suppression of the great Tao. The moment it locks onto me, it will shrink back, unless it doesn't want to continue existing and wants to be replaced. Confidence. It was absolute confidence. However, it was more like he did not care at all. His words contained an indelible belief that originated from his own belief. It was as if what he said was the truth, and the great Tao had to submit to him. Omnipotence, this was a feeling that had suddenly appeared in his heart. It was similar to intuition, and it caused the wisp of hope in his heart to suddenly soar. Qin Yu was slightly stunned when he noticed this feeling, and then he shook his head in a slightly self-mocking manner. It had already come to this, yet he was still delusional enough to think of relying on others. If he wanted to rely on others for everything, then he would have to take action himself. Qingyu. Yun Nuoxing gently closed the book in his hand. He turned around and looked at him with his fluorescent eyes. If, in the end, there's no way to reach the end that you're looking for, pray to me. No, tell me. Perhaps there will be unexpected result. He seemed to have said similar words many times. The more he said, the more he got used to it. Qingyu looked at him seriously. There was a long silence. The two of them did not speak. They just looked at each other until the illusory sunlight disappeared little by little. Night gradually enveloped the planet. The night passed quickly. It was peaceful. Nothing special happened within a radius of 600,000 light-years. Yun Nuoxing and the others were already waiting on a wide platform in the palace. Their mental state was normal. However, Siyu and Feng Qinghuang were yawning all over the sky. Yun Nuoxing was busy supporting one of them. The two girls suddenly pestered him last night to see the moon. They said that they wanted to see what the moon looked like in other worlds. However, this planet had no sun nor satellite. There were only distant spots of starlight. He had no choice but to bring the two girls to a planet a few thousand light-years away to see the moon. Although the golden moon was so close that it almost pressed down on their faces, the two girls were still very excited. After sneaking out to see the scenery for an entire night, the two girls were almost exhausted this morning. Yawn. I don't feel this sleepy even if I don't sleep or cultivate for a night in the celestial realm. Siyu kept covering her mouth with her hand. She could not stop yawning. The energy in the celestial realm is a few thousand times denser than this planet. First, you are not acclimatized to this place. Second, you don't have the usual energy. Naturally, you will feel something you don't normally feel. Yun Nuoxing was holding the two girls in each hand. His face was covered in sweat. The two girls were swaying around like drunkards. He was afraid that they would fall if he did not support them. But if he supported them, Huey's eyes were glowing with green light. At this moment, any thought in his mind would cause him a physical attack. There was no way to cure it. You two should go back to sleep. Yun Nuoxing sighed helplessly. You will have to go into my spiritual world when you go out of this world. Siyu yawned. She closed her eyes and nodded to the air beside her. Okay. Good night. Feng Qinghuang was more direct. Her hand moved up and down Yun Nuoxing's body until it touched his forehead. Then, she turned into a soul energy and went into his spiritual world. Yun Nuoxing quickly stuffed Siyu into his spiritual world and asked his little angel to take care of her. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Speaking of little angel, Yun Nuoxing felt a little strange. Why didn't you come out after we arrived at the void? The little angel helped Siyu and Feng Qinghuang settle down. She shrugged and said, I don't think it's fun. The air outside is terrible. The air in the entire void is terrible. Only you two can stand it. My body is very sensitive. It's more comfortable here. Well, his spiritual world had changed from a hotel to a high-level shelter. Do I have to go in too? Jing Yuanji looked at Siyu and Feng Qinghuang going into Yun Nuoxing's spiritual world. She looked at him thoughtfully and asked with a little anticipation. Yes. Only one person can pass the spirit ascension ritual. So, we have to hide them in our souls and bring them over. Yun Nuoxing saw that there was something wrong with Jing Yuanji's eyes. He thought she would find it boring. He smiled and said, Don't worry. My spiritual world has been decorated by them. It won't be boring. You can also use my perspective to see the situation outside. Just bear with it for a while. I don't think it will take too long. Jing Yuanji smiled and whispered in a voice that only she could hear. I'm not worried that it will be boring. Well, it would be great if it can last a little longer. Ah? No. Nothing. Yun Nuoxing glanced at Jing Yuanji's slightly rosy face. Jing Yuanji quickly turned around and walked to the side. She also felt a little strange. We saw the whole thing from the side. He couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. He walked up to Yun Nuoshing and patted him on the shoulder. He said earnestly, "You are a sinful man." Yun Nuoshing. That's why I said, that girl is just an exception. Hui ignored his confusion and continued to shake his head and sigh. You will always meet someone who suits your taste and type. That girl likes more masculine men, but other girls may not be the same, right? Yun Nuoshing had a strange look on his face. Why are you bringing this up now? Nothing, I just couldn't help but want to say it. Hui shook his head and sighed. He walked towards the edge of the platform. Crazy. Yun Nuoshing muttered. He was about to walk to the edge of the platform when he heard crisp footsteps behind him. He couldn't help but stop and look behind him. He saw a beautiful woman in a white dress walking out of the corridor. There was a quiet smile on her beautiful face facing the sun. Her ink-black hair was tied up in a small tuft on her head. The rest of her hair was casually scattered behind her, reaching her thighs. When she saw Yun Nuoshing, she raised her right hand and shook it gently. The two bracelets hanging on her wrist swayed gently and made a crisp sound. I'm a little late. I'm still not used to the sudden recovery. The woman stood in front of Yun Nuoshing and raised her head slightly to look at him. Her eyes contained a calmness that was not afraid even if the galaxy collapsed in front of her. Have you been waiting for a long time? Yun Nuoshing was stunned. Who are you? Someone sent by Qin Yu? Hui and Jing Yuanji, who heard the movement here, also turned around and walked over. When they saw such a beautiful woman appear, they also looked at each other in confusion. When the woman heard this, she couldn't help but stretch out her jade hand and wave it gently. She looked at her white jade-like arm and suddenly smiled. Feng Lingjun, I can't recognize you. When the three people who were stunned heard this address, their eyes widened in shock. In an instant, they turned into statues that had been weathered for thousands of years. Their faces were full of horror. I didn't expect this to surprise you too. This woman. Qin Yu covered her mouth and chuckled. When she saw his comical expression of horror, she couldn't help but say, Actually, at first, I also thought that Feng Lingjun was the same as me. But after interacting with you for a while, I found that it didn't seem to be the case. Yun Nuoshing came back to his senses. His face twitched crazily, and rows of black lines gradually drooped down from his forehead. No. Is she really a cross-dressing big shot? He didn't recognize her at all. There were no characteristics at all? This change was too thorough, wasn't it? Not only him, Hui and Jing Yuanji also didn't recognize her. It was normal for the two masters not to recognize her, but Jing Yuanji also didn't recognize her, which could only prove that her disguise was too good. Speaking of which, it seemed that it wasn't just the three of them. Even Old Thief said that she was a sissy. Didn't this mean that even he didn't know? This, after a moment of shock, Yun Nuoshing couldn't help but lower his head. When he saw the front armor that was obviously a little heavy, his face twitched a few times. It was a steel plate yesterday. Chapter 1420. At the center of the island, surrounded by rubble, Old Thief, an old man with white hair and a middle-aged man in a black robe, stood at the beginning of the long corridor. There were only 10 people standing on the rubble around them. It did not seem as grand as the last time, and the news of the Spirit Ascension ceremony this time had not spread. There was not a single person watching from 1,000 miles away. It had been less than half a month since the last Spirit Ascension ceremony, so no one knew that it would be held again. Old Thief looked at the sky for a moment and suddenly frowned. He turned around and walked to the place where the Spirit Ascension ceremony was held. He walked around the 3 short pillars a few times, crouched down and touched them lightly. However, he did not touch the bead at the top. After checking all 3 pillars, he returned to where he was. Seeing him return, the old man casually asked, How is the situation with the spirit ascension pillars? Oh. Old Thief muttered to himself for a while before nodding his head. There's no problem. Although the interval is too short, the accumulated energy is just enough to maintain this spirit ascension ceremony. However, after this ceremony, we might not be able to perform the ceremony for a long time. In other words, this is the last chance. The old man nodded and stared blankly at the sky. However, he did not know where he was looking. Perhaps he was looking at the sky that they were protecting, or perhaps he was looking at the stars of the starfield. I'm afraid this is the last chance for this prison. How is the situation over there? There is no response. However, it should not be too much of an effect. The passage is open. The situation on the other planets is similar to ours. The middle-aged man held 2 black beads in his hand. We are not the only ones who can sense the end of this space. They also have their own methods of resistance. I heard that a group of people who are a little too strong have appeared in many worlds. He's a little too strong. To what extent is he too strong? The old man cast his gaze over, and his voice carried some interest. Yes. Let me calculate. The middle-aged man closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. The 2 black beads in his hand emitted a faint light. The light inside the beads illuminated a brilliant starry sky. However, it only lit up for a moment before dissipating. He slowly opened his eyes and shook his head in confusion. I can't calculate it. Oh! The old man was also surprised. This is a little interesting. Many things are fated. Could it be that this time, old Abacus, you wait a bit and calculate for that fellow, Old Thief suddenly said. That guy? You mean the group that Qingyu brought with her? The middle-aged man raised an eyebrow. That's not a problem, but why? You won't suddenly ask me to calculate some meaningless things. Of course not. Just treat it as me worrying for nothing and worrying about the final result of this trip. Although we won't be able to choose anyone we can use in a short period of time, but cough cough, to be honest, I'm also worried about Qingyu. Old Thief scratched the bald patch of hair on his head. Ever since Sissy was chased back here 1,000 years ago, he told me that if there were no accidents, he wouldn't go out again. This time, he suddenly mentioned that he wanted to use his quota and go out again personally. I don't believe that there weren't any factors that caused him to change his mind. However, I haven't seen anything that could cause him to change his mind all these years. If there were any, it would be those few fellows that I've never seen before. Old Thief shook his head and said. The middle-aged man and the old man looked at each other. What Old Thief said made sense. The former thought about it and nodded. It's not a big deal anyway. Let's just forget about it. It's almost time. They're here. Old Thief nodded and felt a wave of energy coming from the horizon. As soon as they looked up, a 2-meter-tall spatial gap opened in the space beside them. Then, 4 figures fell from it and stood on the stone platform. You're here. We're ready here. The Spirit Ascension ceremony is actually using a fixed-point teleportation formation to send people out. You don't have to worry about the spatial coordinates. There's enough energy. You just have to go up and wait at the center of the formation. As for the destination, we don't know much about it. What about you and Qingyu? Old Thief pointed at the corridor and spoke for a long time. When he turned around, he was stunned. There were 4 people in front of him, 2 men and 2 women. Where did Sissy go? Didn't he say that he would go out personally? Did he change his mind at the last minute? When Yun Nuoshing and the other 2 heard this, they all looked at Qingyu, who was standing in front of them. They pointed at her in unison. There, she's the one. Old Thief looked at the beautiful girl in white in front of him, and was stunned for a while. Just when Yun Nuoshing thought that he couldn't take it anymore, he suddenly let out a sigh of relief. Phew! I knew it. This is normal. I've never seen a man who looks like that. Even his movements are cough cough. Anyway, I don't know much about what's going to happen later. He was very rational and ignored this question. Old Thief glanced at Qing Yu's face. Seeing that calm expression that never changed, he finally confirmed that his old friend of many years was a cross-dresser. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Then, he said seriously, then, the situation here is ready. The spirit ascension ceremony can only send one person out at a time. How do you plan to bring them out together? That's easy to say. Yun Nuoxing waved his hand and nodded at the three of them. Come on. I've already told you the method. The journey will only take a short while. I'll find a good place to let you out after I get there. Yun Nuoxing, Jing Yuanji, and the others nodded. They were already familiar with their own bodies. They casually changed their life forms and turned themselves into balls of flashing energy. With a whoosh, they drilled into Yun Nuoxing's soul. As for Qing Yu, she didn't know how to change so complicated. She still needed Yun Nuoxing to guide her. She waited for the two of them to enter first before she reached out her slender finger and tapped Yun Nuoxing's forehead. Then, her body swayed and drilled into his soul. Yun Nuoxing closed his eyes and sensed in his soul for a while. After confirming that the three of them had settled down with the three girls inside, Yun Nuoxing nodded. Then, he turned his gaze. Damn. What did you guys do in my soul world? There were green mountains and clear waters, and the sky was filled with multicolored light. The thick ground was covered with overlapping mountain ranges. The river was like a blue dragon winding around the green mountains. Finally, it surrounded a blue ocean. There were colorful auroras that traversed the entire sky like ribbons. This colorful scene was reflected on the surface of the sea. It was magnificent. Upon a closer look, there was a small sun in the colorful sky. On the other side of the sun, there was a moon and more than 20 stars. Moreover, those stars and moons appeared very clearly in the sky during the day. He didn't dare to imagine what had happened in his soul world in just one day. These mountains, rivers, lakes, and rivers. This world. How many lives would be created in the next second? Ah, we've been discovered. Siyu held a ball of green energy in her hand. Her jade fingers sketched in it for a while. Then, she threw it out forcefully. The ball of light exploded in the air and turned into light spots that fell on a barren mountain range. Immediately, the mountain range was filled with countless trees and plants. The green color covered the entire mountain range at a speed visible to the naked eye. It's nothing. I'll recover soon if I stay here. Later, I won't be able to get out. Little star, you said that I can play as much as I want in here. Then, I will play as much as I want. Siyu replied with a smile. She lowered her head and continued to hold a ball of green energy. It's nothing. I just need to dress up a little. It looks much better than before, right? Feng Qinghuang was sitting beside the little angel. The pink ball of light was just formed in her hand. Before she could decide where to throw it, the little angel helped her and threw it to a high mountain in the barren mountain range. The mountain was smashed down by a few hundred meters. The top of the mountain became a ring-shaped lava lake. Seeing this, Siyu didn't want to make more trees. Instead, she changed the lava lake. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. Looking at her soul world that had become strange, she felt that her head was swelling. It was very easy for them to create this world with their own power and the little bit of power they borrowed from his soul. For him, creating a world was nothing more than moving his hands and spreading a drop of energy with essence. Even creating a small world required him to be a little more serious. In short, with his energy, the two girls could do something that they couldn't do at their current level, creating a world. Although they were making mud now, they were having a good time and were having fun anyway. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. My soul world. My soul world. He felt that he was going to die in this life and in the future. The only fortunate thing was that Zai and Feng Qinghuang couldn't create such a colorful world because they didn't have the power to lend to him. What's wrong with you? Seeing Yun Nuoxing suddenly become very haggard, as if she was suffering from heart failure, heart injury, soul injury, and liver injury. Old Crook was also confused. He didn't know what had happened in less than a minute to make her so haggard. I'm fine. Ahem, let's go. Yun Nuoshing looked at him in despair and staggered forward. Sister Jing, come and play. What do you think we're missing? Sister Qingyu, come and help us make a glacier. Don't worry. It's easy. I'll teach you soon. Yun Nuoshing staggered and almost fell down from the long corridor. Standing in the middle of the 3 pillars, Yun Nuoshing looked at a magic circle that slowly appeared on the ground under her feet. Old Crook and the others stood on the surrounding rubble and made the same pose, as if they were casting a magic circle. When the 3 pillars and the magic circle started to move, Yun Nuoshing suddenly felt that the surrounding space was only the circle under her feet. She could still see the outside space, but she needed to use the power of the rules to sense the existence of that space. She looked at the situation outside. There weren't many people. This small number of people was probably enough to make the 3 pillars and the magic circle work. She didn't see as many people as we said. Probably, other than being used to send people out, this ritual really does have some meaning of ritual in it. However, the situation is special now. It's been carried out twice, so there's no need to do anything more symbolic than practical, we said in her soul. Yun Nuoshing nodded and glanced at him. Then, she slipped out as if she was escaping. Her face was full of sorrow and despair. Even Hui was infected by the group of girls and was making things there. He felt that his soul world might really be useless. No, he might be done for. The process of the magic circle wasn't very long. Yun Nuoshing stared at the 3 pillars that were constantly emitting a huge amount of energy and the power of space to divert her attention. When the pillars and the magic circle worked to a certain extent, the space rippled gently like water. At the same time, she felt that the space was spreading upward. Well, it was more like a door opened above, exposing a new space in front of her. The huge magic circle in the star field exploded. A brilliant golden light fell from the sky and landed in the space where she was standing. A new aura came from it. It was the aura of the energy outside, which was more than 10 times stronger than the aura in the land of exile. Lord Fengling, help me grab a strand of ritual energy. Can wash away the mark on my body. Qingyu felt that the ritual had officially begun. She threw the light in her hand to see you, then took a few steps forward and raised her hand high. Oh! Yun Nuoshing responded. Her soul power spread out and she sucked in a mouthful of energy. She threw it into the soul world and let it sprinkle on Qingyu's body. A golden light flashed on her body, and there seemed to be the sound of some kind of shackles breaking. The energy fluctuated for a moment and then calmed down. Yun Nuoshing caught a strand of energy that she had never felt before and let it flow into her hand through her soul. She held it in her palm and looked at it for a moment. It's the real power of distortion. It's just a simple energy mark, but it contains a slightly stronger power of the rules. It was a very simple mark. For him, he could easily tear thousands of copies of it. However, the life in this area was a little weak in terms of rules. The people of the distorted race used this method to mark the exiled people. They were not worried that they could break the mark on their own, so there was no need to worry about whether someone would suddenly escape or something. There must be a life form of the distorted race outside. Definitely. It's just that I don't know what kind of composition and status the race guarding this world is. Jing Yuanji's eyelids drooped slightly. She held a light in her hand, but her mind was not here. It's fine if it's just a manager of some remote area. But, looking at these void areas, it doesn't look like a remote area that only sent some dispensable people to guard it. To create such a complicated thing in this world, the Guardian might be quite strong. Before we figure this out, get the information of the next move, and seal this world, we should take it easy. We also said. Hearing that, Yun Nuoshing shook his head. No. Even if we have reached this step, we can only take it easy. If the Guardian's power is really that strong, we just need to make a move on a slightly larger scale. If they can sense something, they will be able to send the news to the higher-up. Even if that's not the case, the higher-ups will sooner or later notice that something is wrong with this world. If they want to do something, we have to be mentally prepared to fight to the death. If we can't contact the realm of the gods, we can only rely on this part of the power to fight. We muttered for a moment. It's a little difficult, but it's not too difficult. Anyway, you're here. As for us, we can just lie down in the spiritual temple. Even if there's a destructive attack on the order level, even if it can tear our souls into pieces, it's useless. As long as the rules of the realm of the gods don't disappear, the spiritual temple will continue to exist, and we will be able to live. Don't worry, it won't be a problem. Lie down for a while. Yun Nuoshing sighed softly upon hearing this. Optimism was indeed his greatest strength. Well, if he was optimistic, then so be it. Sometimes there was no need to think about the worst of things. The golden light had reached a certain level, and Yun Nuoshing could no longer see the situation outside. He looked up at the light pillar and suddenly found that the golden light was surging into his body, trying to transform him into an energy life form. After thinking about it, he expelled the golden light. His body flashed gently like a lightning that was about to be annihilated, and then his body was wrapped in a layer of golden light. He quickly floated up and disappeared along with the golden light pillar. On the rocks around the central island, Old Thief and the others saw that the golden light had disappeared. They all breathed a sigh of relief, and the hand gestures that remained unchanged quietly dispersed. He looked at the sky in the distance. We still have to explain to a lot of people the second spirit ascension ritual in such a short period of time. Those who saw this scene today will probably be curious. Most of them won't care too much. After all, there have been such examples a long time ago. The middle-aged man shrugged and looked at Old Thief. By the way, I just calculated for that little brother. What's the situation? Old Thief was energized. The old man also walked over slowly, looking like he was all ears. He almost broke my divine calculation stone. What situation? What do you mean? The two of them were confused. In short, he is a dangerous person. A very, very, very dangerous person. Even the Great Path will be afraid of him. The middle-aged man used 3 very to describe him. Although Old Thief and the old man did not understand his strange words, they could hear that he was slightly frightened in his words. Their expressions were a little serious. If it's a blessing, this world will follow his wishes and let everything end. The strange thing is, if it's a calamity, there are no signs at all. I don't know if it means that everything will be destroyed. For example, even I am dead, so I can't even see a single thread. The middle-aged man shook his head. Let's not care about this. We have done what we can do. The rest can only be left to fate. This world will be ruined or reborn. If it's not destined, no one can do it. Looking at his back that was gradually getting farther and farther away, Old Thief and the old man looked at each other. They both shook their heads and shrugged their shoulders in confusion. This guy's words were really strange. Rays of brilliant golden light were like the light of countless stars in the starry sky being materialized. They intertwined into one piece in the space, like a brilliant sea of light, and smashed toward a huge array that suddenly appeared in the starry sky. The array in front of them had also appeared once above the spirit ascension ritual. Yun Nuoshing sensed a very strong power of space from it. In addition, although he could not see the situation outside, he could feel a huge life force falling together with him toward the only array in sight. He also felt a faint and familiar life force beside him. Perhaps I Ching and Qing Jun had also followed him. Buzz. After rushing into the array for the second space transmission, Yun Nuoshing first felt gravity emerging below him. He adjusted his posture unhurriedly. As soon as he was ready to land, a somewhat old and broken stone floor appeared below him. The golden beam of light guided him to land on the ground, and it slowly dimmed. A faint breeze blew from behind him. He took a light breath, but he didn't smell anything. After the golden beam of light disappeared, what appeared in Yun Nuoshing's sight was a spacious square paved with gray bricks. In the sky, an array about 10 feet in size suddenly appeared. A golden beam of light fell to the ground from it. A second later, the golden beam of light dissipated, and a person appeared from it. The array also disappeared. The array appeared and disappeared. The array was still brightly colored. It looked like fireworks, opening and closing quite rhythmically. Lord Feng, Lord Hui. Dozens of voices shouted in unison in his soul. Yun Nuoshing turned, but he didn't know where to turn. After being stunned for a second, he casually turned in a direction and saw I Ching running over from the other side of the square. His face was full of joy. "She'll wait first. Don't gather. Disperse. Gather when I inform you later." Yun Nuoshing gave him a look and said in his soul. I Ching was stunned for a moment. Then, he continued to run forward happily, but he had deliberately changed his direction. He looked like a country bumpkin who had just entered the city and was running wildly in the endless square. After running for a while, he stopped unhurriedly. Qing Jun, who was watching from the side, tried his best to hold back his laughter, and his face turned red. He didn't know whether this square was thousands of meters long or tens of thousands of meters wide. The flickering of the array hadn't stopped since the beginning. He counted a little. There might already be 20 to 30,000 lives here. According to this scale, the final number should be 1 or 2 times more. And each life probably represented a life star. Some should come from the same place of exile as him, and some might come from other places of exile. What should we do now? Yun Nuoshing asked in a whisper in his soul. It's not over yet. When everyone is here this time, someone will come here, Qing Yu said unhurriedly, pinching an energy ball. Yun Nuoshing responded and looked around casually. Suddenly, he thought of a problem. I said it was a last-minute ceremony. I thought I would be the only one here, but why are there so many people? It was indeed an accident to suddenly hold another spirit ascension ceremony, but if there is no one here to receive you, the spirit ascension ceremony can't be successfully carried out. Sometimes it will even be put on hold for a period of time. Yun Nuoshing suddenly understood. Although it was a last-minute ceremony, if they applied unilaterally, they still had to wait for the person monitoring here to approve it. And this person might have also applied for other life stars. Some of them might have been put on hold for a period of time, and some of them might have applied in the past 2 days. This was probably what he meant. It turned out that there were restrictions on entry and exit in this place. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.